Aha, and we're live. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I've got green for me sound machine. There we are. We're on just a little bit early, and we've been off for a wee while. We've been sick and injured, so I'm not sure if anybody's going to be there tonight. This episode was posted up at short notice, I suppose. So I'm hoping to give you a wee bit more notice from now on. But we're back, and hopefully we'll be carrying on weekly as possible, or as usual. I suppose I'll wait to 10 o'clock and see if anyone's there and explain all things. But in the meantime, if anybody is there, say hello. Tonight we're going to chat about, tonight's chapter 23, actually, of Children of Dune. Pretty much the previous time we covered 2 chapters together. Pardon me. There's Sean saying, good evening, Doc. Good to see you. Hope you're feeling well. Thank you very much, Sean. Much appreciated. I am indeed. There's 10 o'clock, Sean, so I'll just do the hellos. I'll just say hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Doc Sloan. Welcome to my science fiction station, also known as the Doghouse, where we're having our Children of Dune book club, chapter 33, as part of hopefully our 6-year mission to explore the worlds and books of Frank Herbert's universe, But yes, indeed. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I don't know. I think my voice is going to sound a little bit different from now on. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if it's me or not. To be honest, if I'm just hearing it different. But no, I'm good. I had a ridiculously bad, stupid accident with a piece of food that lodged in the back of my throat and burned and burned and burned. Basically, and I didn't have any liquid at all handy. So it did a real nasty job. I suppose the interesting thing is, I'm sure you probably all know, I've had a pretty bad cough for some time. Pardon me, not a normal cough. And turns out I had an infection in my throat. So the burn has kind of been one of those kind of fortunate accidents. But I ended up doing sort of, my throat closed over basically, and I almost couldn't breathe. So I did 4 days in hospital, followed by a week's dose of major antibiotics. But the good thing is I'm all healed up. The throat's healed well, and the infection is gone too. So my throat's still a wee bit tender, folks. I'm not quite 100% with it, which is why I took an extra week off, basically just to rest it. And I've had a wee brief chat with Chaya online, and apart from that, I haven't called near a computer. I've done diddly, basically. I've got our work done for tonight, but I've just decided to take the whole thing kind of kicked the crap out of me, basically. So I decided to take the rest, So apologies about that. It's bizarre, just bizarre, freak accident. It was a mushroom. A mushroom lodged in my throat, nearly killed by a mushroom. Who'd have thought, So there we go. That's what happened. Apologies, but believe it or not, it did land me in hospital. And I was not a particularly good way. When I was in the first, I got transferred from one hospital to the other. When I was in the first hospital with my throat closed, I kept getting electric shocks off all the equipment. When I was transferred in the ambulance on the way up between local hospital and the hospital I ended up at, we had an accident in the ambulance. And then when I got to the hospital, where I was seen by, believe it or not, a girl called Alia, who did the surgery on my throat. Alia of the knife, if you like, so Alia of the scalpel. But yeah, I had to get a big needle put down into my throat and all this stuff pulled out, and then anything that they couldn't get, they basically went in and cut the inside of my throat. So I got sort of 4 cuts. Pardon me. Which was an interesting experience. But yeah, there we go, folks. So that's it. It's one of these things, isn't it? It's interesting what can nearly do you in. There's some little thing, But no, I'm all good, folks, and thank you very much. And I know I've got a lot of wee comments and stuff from people, and I'm going to emails and things, and I'll get a day and just hit them all and get back to you on that. I know I'm ridiculously bad at it. Xvid's overdue an email. In fact, I'm probably going to make, my hands are a bit bad at my Xvid. You're long overdue a reply. I'm probably just going to make you a private video and put it up. It'll be a lot easier for me to do if you don't mind. Might be the personal touch, But I'll just quickly catch up with everyone's comments. There's Carlos saying, "Hey Doc, glad to see you. You had me worried for a minute. Thanks, Carlos. Had me worried too. Flaccid House is saying that's awful good to see you on the men. Thank you. Julian Thompson says, hi, Doc. Glad to see you better. Hey, everyone. Good to be back. Yes, indeed, Julian. Thank you very much. And Carlos, evening, gents. Cynthia, hi, Doc. Glad to see you. Thank you very much. Cynthia, likewise. Very good to see you again. And Alia of the Scalpel. Yeah, that's kind of where I was at with it. And no, she was excellent. I had a bit of bother in the hospital with some of the nurses, actually, and it turned out I wasn't the only one. But I'm one of the doctors, but we sorted that out. But yes, indeed, Alia of the Scalpel. Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's a heck of a job that she did. And apparently, what she told me is I've got the best gag reflex that she's ever seen in her life. Anything goes in my mouth, and I'm so yeah, getting a scalpel put down, and she basically had to hold my mouth open, go in with the scalpel and cut. And she did a fantastic job, I have to say. So there we go, folks. Thank you very much for all your kind comments. It's really nice to be back, and yeah, I feel a bit different. I feel like I sound a bit different, but who knows? We'll see. So a couple of wee things, housekeeping, I suppose. Jumping back a couple of chapters before we get started, chapter 31, we had this epigraph. I just wanted to catch up with this. What I might do is quickly scan this from my notes and attach it to the comments section of the video on chapter 31. But it was just very quickly to do with the epigraph that we got from Tagir Mohandas, Conversations with a Friend. It was about Jack Urutu. I'll quickly read it to you again. It was, the password was given to me by a man who died in the dungeons of Arrakis. You see, that is where I got this ring in the shape of a tortoise. Pardon me. It was in the souk outside the city where I was hidden by the rebels. The password, that had been changed many times. Since then, it was persistence. And the countersign was tortoise. It got me out of there alive. That's why I brought the ring. Now, a reminder. Now, as much as it's talking about tortoise, there's a couple of things there. Persistence, and I think it kind of made us think of tortoise and the hare, different things like that. And I suppose, what is it, the rabbit and Achilles paradox. But in relation to this is to do with Jack Urutu. And I'm not kind of, but if we swap out tortoise for turtle, if you think, it might be the case that there's a tortoise, I'm not too sure. But what the ring represents here, this tortoise ring or turtle ring, is the grandfather of the turtle, Urara Ramonha, who had a sticky shell. And it was just to point this out as we're going along about that this is about Jack Urutu. And I popped up the Jack Urutu myth again a wee while back, just on the station, just on the community section, so people could read it if they hadn't noticed it. It's kind of hard to see what goes along there with all these, because it's always scrolling down. Bear with me a wee second. I thought I had saved this here somewhere handy. Let me see. Anything was delivered to playlist now. Oh, maybe not. The looks of it. Bear with me a wee second, see if I can go find it. I'll tell you what, let's just type it in. There you are. Where are you? No, that's not it. Sorry, bear with me a wee second. There you are. So it was just in relation to the legend of the Jack Urutu. So he was basically Jack Urutu is a cannibalistic chief who only ate the flesh of children and who gave no respite to the warlike Arawak Indians of the northern Amazon. His name was Jack Urutu. Basically, how he's done in them, he began to start eating the children of the Muras Indians, his neighbors to the south. The Muras went to the shaman to ask for help in confronting this abominable neighbor. Several spells were cast, countless emissaries were dispatched, but nothing could dissuade the bloodthirsty Jack Urutu. And the Kuramins, or boys, continued to disappear. Desperate, the Muras tasked the grandfather of the turtle Urara Ramonha, which has a sticky shell, with approaching the chief and setting a trap for him. The old turtle searched and ended up finding Jacurutu. He talked to him, he offered him some eggs, and said he was on a mission of peace. Then he said, "Sir, you're tired, rest your foot on my shell." When he followed the turtle's suggestion, Jacurutu got his foot stuck in the slime on the shell. Then the turtle's grandfather dragged the chief into the river, who drowned. Feeling that he was going to die, Jacurutu left a message for the Muras. And then that's his message about how he liked to eat them. But it was just in relation to that the ring there, within that chapter, where we're heading with Jacurutu, as much as it's got this ring in the shape of a tortoise, is what it said. Password persistence countersign tortoise. And it doesn't actually say, by the way, that the grandfather of the turtle is a turtle itself, I suppose. But I just thought that was the relevance of the ring, that's shaped in the shape of a tortoise in relation to that myth, where we're going there with pardon me, Leto II, as he gets to Jacurutu. So it was just a wee thing about the little ring and the tortoise that I thought I'd mention. It kind of had some relevance to the Jacurutu myth. But there we go. Now, the day of the Kwisatz Haderach is what I've titled this one. I think I gave it a different name in the video title. So we have quite a big. Let me get our books open here, folks. I'd imagine this chapter will go quite quickly. There's not too many things that need explained in it, I think. About 7.5 pages, isn't it? Right, let me just get that aside to get organized again. I've got a sofa encroaching here. I'm going to possibly attempt to start presenting this program in a comfortable manner. I don't know if that would be a good thing or not. I've got one other problem, is that I've been keeping all of our stuff in these notebooks, as you can see. I'm about to run out on this one, and unfortunately it looks like the people who are selling them have stopped selling them. So yeah, it's a funny size, so I'm going to have a bit of bother. I might have to shift to, which is kind of sad, just in relation to the books on the let me see if you see what I mean. I don't know if you can see those, the way everything's kind of lining up. It was looking good, and I might have to shift to a different size book, which is sad, but I'm going to see if I can track them down. Because I quite like using them, but I was kind of hoping to use the same books for all 6 Dune novels. Right, so we've got a fair old chunky epigraph to start this chapter. I will tear through it and then we'll run back over it, I suppose. So here we go. Epigraph number 33. Above all else, the Mentat must be a generalist, not a specialist. It is wise to have decisions of great moment monitored by generalists. Experts and specialists lead you quickly into chaos. They are a source of useless nitpicking, the ferocious quibble over a comma. I quite like that. The Mentat generalist, on the other hand, should bring to decision-making a healthy common sense. He must not cut himself off from the broad sweep of what is happening in his universe. He must remain capable of saying, there's no real mystery about this moment. This is what we want now. It may prove wrong later, but we'll correct that when we come to it. The Mentat generalist must understand that anything which we can identify as our universe is merely part of a larger phenomenon. But the expert looks backward. He looks into the narrow standards of his own speciality. The generalist looks outward. He looks for living principles, knowing full well that such principles change, that they develop. It is to the characteristic of change itself that the Mentat generalist must look. There can be no permanent catalogue of such change, no handbook or manual. You must look at it with as few preconceptions as possible, asking yourself, now, what is this thing doing? And this comes from the Mentat handbook. Julian's saying, I have complicated feelings about this epigraph, as do I. So we'll run with it from a classicist point of view. So the classics degree, the way it's perceived, is seen as a kind of elite form of education. I think that's a bad perception, though it has been that in the past. But the question is, what do you need to be a good classicist? Or what does studying the classical world turn you into, if you want? And there's different types of classicists, first of all, and the first type is a literary classicist. So these are people who learn about the ancient world only by studying the literature, the writings of the people there, and their knowledge isn't that broad. It depends on how much they read. The other type of classicist is the one that does everything, and that's myself. So we look at everything. So if you study classics, just to run this as the generalist, and anybody can, it's great fun, by the way. Things like what we've got, Project Gutenberg online, it's all there for free. The great stuff about the ancient world is it's not governed by public domain or anything like or by intellectual property. It all belongs to us. So you would have, studying religion, gods, heroes, mortals, this kind of thing, how they look at society, religion, mythology, literature, poetry, prose, plays, drama. We look at politics. Obviously, every aspect of their society, from how they dress to how they make pots, to how they paint their pots, who paints them, what's the point of that? Their stories, their folk tales, how they interact with their natural world, how they trade, their economics, how they fight, how they develop weapons, their theory of warfare, how things develop. They're in particular with the classical world, then we have to throw in everything else. So physics, how they look at the physical world, philosophy, and the beginnings of science and medicine, and so many things are there. So to be able to deal with it, and you can't learn it all. There's no way, and that's them with two societies, the Greeks and the Romans, and we know so much about them. But to deal with it all, you just need to be adaptable. You just need to be a good generalist. You need to have a good interest in lots of different things. And if you're a person like that, you will make an excellent classicist, providing you're interested in the Greeks and the Romans. It's as simple as that. And if you weren't, by the time you finish studying it, you will be a generalist. And I've said it a couple of times that the classicist is the ultimate generalist. We've got our hands in so many different pies, and the reason why that's a good thing is it helps us build up a much fuller, broader understanding of these two civilizations from which pretty much all Western civilizations developed out of. And by doing so, then that gives us, for someone like myself, then we can bring that knowledge of how civilization developed, what happened with them, and apply it to the modern world, because their legacy is everywhere. And that's how I look at being a generalist. At the same time, I'm a specialist because, because I've got a PhD. So that's a level of narrowing your field as much as you can to deal with one thing, one topic in as much detail as possible. And it's an interesting thing that as much as if you get a PhD or do a piece of work like that, highly specialized, when you cross that threshold of the other side, you'll find that actually to get back into your work and start working and doing work, if it's your academic, is that you need to go back to generalizing again. You need to be a generalist again. You need to have a better, broader understanding of your subject, especially when your focus is so narrow in doing something like a PhD, that you know everything about that little thing and you're probably the world's expert on that little thing, but within everything else, you could be astonishingly ignorant, you see. So that's my viewpoint on generalists. I think they're very hard to find these days. I think everyone's looking for specialists in the workplace and things like this. And the level of specialization is ridiculous. A generalist is a person that you can throw into a situation and they should be able to adapt to anything, which is much better than someone who's so specialized that you give them a different task and they have no clue what to do. So let's run through the epigraph here. I said Julian's saying he's got feelings about it. Above all else, the mentat must be a generalist, not a specialist. Wise to have decisions of great moment monitored by generalists. I would agree. Experts and specialists lead you quickly into chaos. I don't agree with that. Expertise and specialism have their place. And generally, if you don't know much about something, it's good to hire someone who does. If you can do something yourself, do it yourself. If not, hire someone who knows what they're doing and get them to do it. And it's their particular expertise, their specialism. as a generalist, you would know that you shouldn't be good at everything, that there's stuff that you hire out. So experts and specialists lead you quickly into chaos. I don't agree at all. They are a source of useless nitpicking. That can happen. The ferocious quibble over a comma. Yeah, it's pedantry as well, but it's not necessarily chaos. I can tell you as a computer programmer who's written programs, you miss a comma somewhere and your program's a mess, and it will one comma in the wrong place in say a Java program will cause hundreds and hundreds of cascade errors. And the way of you're looking for literally it's something as simple as that. So the ability to look through a computer program for a missing full stop or a missing comma is a useful thing. Especially as that the one error will create hundreds of errors. If you start trying to fix all those individual errors without fixing, fix the right one, and you lose all 300 of them. It's that kind of thing. So we don't agree with the first paragraph there. The Mentat generalist, on the other hand, again, a Mentat being a human computer, someone who's dealing with data, should bring to decision making a healthy common sense. Okay. Common sense is an interesting term. He must not cut himself off from the broad sweep of what is happening in his universe. So no ivory towers for the Mentat generalist, if you like. Be a part of your world. Don't separate yourself from it. He must remain capable of saying, there's no real mystery about this moment. This is what we want now. It may prove wrong later, but we'll correct that when we come to it. I find that statement a wee bit strange. Must remain capable of saying this, that there's no mystery about this moment, that it'll make sense in some way, I suppose. This is what we want now. I don't necessarily agree with that. It may prove wrong later, but we'll correct that when we come to it. I wouldn't say this is what we want now. This is what you got now. The Mentat generalist, as we go on, must understand that anything which we can identify as our universe is merely part of a larger phenomenon. Well, the universe, I think, is meant to be everything that exists in it. And if we want to start anything that we can identify as our universe, must be part of a larger phenomenon. What that is, I don't know. What's it expanding into? Nothingness, this kind of thing. It seems like a bit of a vagary to me. But the expert, here we go. So that's the Mentat generalist. Here's the difference, I suppose. The expert looks backwards, not necessarily. He looks into the narrow standards of his own speciality. True, I suppose. The generalist looks outward. He looks for living principles, knowing full well that such principles change, that they develop, things evolve. Yeah. It is to the characteristic of change itself that the Mentat generalist must look. There can be no permanent catalogue of such change. No handbook or manual. You must look at it with as few preconceptions as possible, asking yourself, now, what is this thing doing? Which is fair enough. What does this thing do? Reminds me very much of the line from, was it Beyond Lies the Wub? Where one of the officers, the Philip K. Dick story, one of the officers walks in and sees the wub and just goes, what's this thing? I think that just exactly reminded me of that. So there we go. An awful lot about generalism and specialism, if you like. We're going to go with that. We're going to get to Frank's idea that specialism equals death. It's not necessarily the case. And I think the interesting thing from my point of view is I think that Frank would see himself as a generalist and not a specialist. But what you've got here, I suppose, is a clear separation between the two. The suggestion here is that you can't be one while being the other, if that makes sense. And I disagree. Pardon me. I'll just catch up with your comments there, folks. So Julian was saying, I have complicated feelings about this epigraph. Fire away, Julian, if you've got some comments. I'd love to hear them on it. It's long and not too sure what to think about it. There's Chaya saying shalom, all. Shalom, Chaya. Thank you very much for joining us. Good to see you. Julie said, hi, Chaya. And Cynthia, the trivium and the quadrivium, seven liberal arts. And Chaya saying, remember to give a thumbs up. Thank you very much, folks. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and it's good to all see you all back. Thank you very much for joining me. By the way, it's great to have us here. It's good to be back. Yeah, we're going to go into this kind of thing about specialism and so on, and it's a thing that Frank Herbert's quite interested in. I don't agree that you can be an expert or a specialist and not be a generalist. It's just that you have a very particular field, if you like. I'm one. My areas of speciality are extremely narrow. Frank Herbert's Dune series, pretty much. Everything else about me is a generalist, and I have a much broader knowledge about science fiction, for example, than I do have. The knowledge is bigger than my specialized knowledge on Frank Herbert and Dune, if that makes sense. And again, there are things that I agree with here that, and I think just as the bit here, where is it? Much as I would say, by the way, that not all experts look backwards at all. So this is meant to be, by the way, the Mentat handbook, and it's telling you that no handbook or manual can, there's no, there can be no permanent catalogue of such change, no handbook or manual, no way of really kind of teaching you how to deal with it. The one bit that sort of does ring true to me would be that the generalist looks outward. He looks for living principles, knowing full well that such principles change, that they develop, and it is to the characteristic of change itself that the Mentat generalist must look. Change is the only constant, I think. Was it Chai was asking a wee bit back? Can we think of any? Pardon me, at least I think it was Chai. Were there any universal truths? Change is a constant. That's one. I think. But yeah, it's and so, for example, someone like myself, if I think that the interesting thing about looking at the ancient world, classic world, is I would go, I know X, Y, and Z about it, but tomorrow something else will be discovered which might change how I look at X, Y, and Z. And the trick about it is really to always be fluid. If you like, history is fluid, it changes because our understanding of it changes. We find new things, we learn new details, this kind of thing. So there's a little bit of truth in it, but no, not all. And it is applying to the Mentat generalist, I suppose. The Mentat must be a generalist, not a specialist. The one thing I would agree with, by the way, is it's wise to have decisions of great moment monitored by generalists. People who know lots of different things can often provide a very, very different point of view on something, if you like. I tend to provide people with points of view that they seldom consider in general life, if you know what I mean. But there we go, and that's the Mentat handbook. Julian saying the epigraph strikes me as Frank being very countercultural and postmodern. I got the sense that there's a good bit of Frank's personality in that. Mentats are odd ducks. I argue a lot what they do is attainable by us primitive old Terrans, largely because what they do is simplistic, is dialectical empiricism. We've talked about it before, John. There are real computers, real people like this. And I suppose it's probably, human computers are probably just on their way out, I'd imagine. I collect and store and hoard information, and I do operate in a way that I don't know everything, if that makes sense. And no matter how much work I do on something, no matter how well I think I've covered it, I'll miss something. There'll be something that I don't know, no matter what. It's just a given, and I think that's a good thing. I think in essence that you can never know totally any one subject without. There's nothing that I don't think you can know absolutely. And the good thing about that is that it leaves a little bit of mystery in everything that you're interested in. I think something else always to learn. There's always another book to read, another opinion to learn, another viewpoint. Yeah, here we go. Right, so there are odd ducks indeed, mentats. And I think there's I think there's far too much reliable. People put far too much faith in them in this universe, I think. And I almost think of almost that in that way with all the schools, that all of the schools became crutches in a kind of way. Yeah. But as I said, just I had a point of view on that one. I thought, and I would just present it as a generalist. You know, and I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest with you. I love being a generalist. I love knowing lots and lots of things about lots and lots of different subjects. And as much as I'm a misanthrope, I don't like large groups of people or anything like that. I do engage with individuals, and I pride myself on being pretty much able to talk to anyone about anything. You know, and to take an interest in it. I'm kind of interested in everything in a funny way. Oh, I must update you on my reading material at the minute, folks, because we've got a couple of things that actually help. In fact, very quickly, just before we get in, I'll show you what I have picked up to help our understanding of the Dune series. I was having a chat. My level of book addiction is getting obscene. I've got so many books on the go, but nearly finished Frank Herbert's White Plague. We've picked up this one now. I'm going to do a wee video very soon, which is kind of going to be like an intermezzo, if you like, for the book club for Children of Dune. I've talked about this. We're going to have a wee bit of a natter about. We're just going to present the myth and ritual stuff from Lord Raglan and a few other things. There's stuff in this that I'd like to read to you as well. The White Goddess. I was kind of figuring this is kind of wondering how much did Herbert grab, if any, from Graves. But I'm looking forward to reading it. Just a wee bit of course. I got the Lone Wolf and Cub Volume 1 omnibus. I've just got a copy of the Quran, which I thought would be useful, especially with the the good thing is I suppose it's got an index, which I think might help with some of the language. So I'll just start reading that. I'm not enjoying reading it one bit, I can tell you. I'm on the fourth. Is it Sumas? Is that what they're called? Yeah. So I thought that would help. I'm continuing that with Frank Herbert. Very quickly. What did I do with it? Savers of Paradise. We picked a copy of that up. Bear with me a wee second. I buried it somewhere down in the other room. Goodness gracious. Yeah, there we go. So I've been curious about this one for a long time. This is meant to be another one of the books that Frank's plundered mightily. It looks pretty interesting stuff, to be honest with you. About Sabres of Paradise by Leslie Blanche. It's a lot thicker, a chunkier book than I had perceived it to be. In fact, it's not at all what I thought it was. It's just short of. It's about 480 pages. There we go. I've been chatting a bit about this, by the way, but also with Julian, just to pick up the Kinsella's wonderful translation of The Town, which I'm really looking forward to. I might read you some of that stuff. So there's a wee bit of extra, well, kind of hospital reading for me, but I've got that much on the go. But I thought there's a couple of those books that should help inform our understanding of Frank Herbert's Dune series a little bit better. I look forward to getting them read, and we can kind of update you on that as we get them done. Dune itself is a more general living principle-based series, not a specialized text? ? Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. There's too much going on in it. You're quite right. I would agree with that. And it's that idea that all the different themes interweave to such a level that it's difficult to tease one apart. Yes, indeed. Very much a general living principle-based series. Not a specialized tech. Yeah, I think we'll have to have a wee chat about how Frank's understanding of tech and how he gets around it, I think, But it's an interesting little it's not a little one, it's quite, it's a whole single paragraph, isn't it? But it's quite chunky. But experts and specialists lead you quickly into chaos. No, not sure about that. Anyway, here we go with our chapter. It's the day of the Kwisatz Haderach. Oh, sorry, very quickly, our Location here is the Plaza of Alia's temple, and our time frame is 1 month after the attack on the twins, about 28 days, and it's early morning. I've got a howler of a misprint right off the bat, folks. I'll just read it to you. It was the day of the exquisite Sadrach, the first holy day of those who followed Muad'Dib. It recognized the defiled Paul Atreides as that person who was everywhere simultaneously, the male Bene Gesserit who mingled both male and female ancestry in an inseparable power to become the one with all. The faithful called this day Ail, the sacrifice, to commemorate the death which made his presence real in all places. So just reading that first wee bit again, that's me reading from the text there. Again, just to show you this, if you can see it there, we go. Ooh, we've got defiled. That's completely the wrong word. And we've checked this, and it should be deified. So I'll read it again with the correct word. But I'm just wondering how many of you have got that defiled and how many have you deified. So to read it again properly with the mistake fixed, it was the day of the exquisite Sadrach, the first holy day of those who followed Muad'Dib. It recognized the deified Paul Atreides as that person who was everywhere simultaneously, the male Bene Gesserit who mingled both male and female ancestry in an inseparable power to become the one with all. The faithful called this day Ail, the sacrifice, to commemorate the death which made his presence real in all places. There we go. And my text, oh, hang on, sorry, I missed a comment there. Julian was saying that this is what makes it a problem for more specialized and focused literary academics. Yeah, I think you do have to approach it in a broad way. Cynthia is saying my text says it recognized the deified Paul. Mine too. Yeah. I just read off the bat, we're back, and we've got a howler. Yeah, there's no way that was defiled. I've now got an electronic copy that I think matches yours, Cynthia. It was that obvious, this one, I think. So deified is Paul being made a god. To deify someone is to make them a god. And we're getting a wee bit of, he's got both the person who's everywhere simultaneously, that's the exquisite Sadrach, isn't it? Both male and female ancestry, and an inseparable power to become the one with all. So Ail is, as far as I know, Hebrew, and I've got a bunch of meanings for it. So it can mean ram as food, ram as sacrifice, pillar, door, jams, pilaster, strong man, chief, leader, or mighty tree. In this context, the day Ail is the sacrifice to commemorate the death which made his presence real in power. So in that sense, we have one of the definitions there is that of a ram as a sacrifice. Interesting. Now, the preacher chose the early morning of this day to appear once more in the Plaza of Alia's temple, defying the order for his arrest, which everyone knew had been issued. The delicate truce prevailed between Alia's priesthood and those desert tribes which had rebelled. But the presence of this truce could be felt as a tangible thing, which moved everyone in Arrakis with uneasiness. The preacher did not dispel that mood. So this is a hangover of that sort of almost burgeoning civil war. The Fremen of Alia's priesthood versus the desert tribes, and we've had it, so it's a separation of the Fremen people. So we're told this is the 28 days morning. It was the 28th day of official mourning for Muad'Dib's son, 6 days following the memorial rite at Old Pass, which had been delayed by the rebellion. Even the fighting had not stopped the Hajj, though the preacher knew the plaza would be heavily thronged on this day. Most pilgrims tried to time their stay on Arrakis to cross Ail, to feel then the holy presence of the exquisite Sadrach on his day. Where are we? I just want to check something. Yeah. Okay. So So we're getting the wee setup here. The preacher entered the plaza at first light, finding the place already thronging with the faithful. He kept a hand lightly on the shoulder of his young guide, sensing the cynical pride in the lad's walk. Now, when the preacher approached, people noticed every nuance of his behavior. Such attention was not entirely distasteful to the young guide. The preacher merely accepted it as a necessity. Right, so taking his stance on the third of the temple steps, the preacher waited for the hush to come. When silence spread like a wave through the throng and the hurrying footsteps of others come to listen could be heard at the plaza's limits, he cleared his throat. Pardon me. It was still morning cold around him, and light had not yet come down into the plaza from the building tops. He felt the grey hush of the great square as he began to speak. I have come to give homage and to preach in the memory of Leto Atreides II, he said, calling out in that strong voice so reminiscent of a wormsman from the desert. I do it in compassion for all those who suffer. I say to you what the dead Leto has learned, that tomorrow has not yet happened and may never happen. This moment here is the only observable time and place for us in our universe. I tell you to learn that a government's growth and its death are apparent in the growth and death of its citizens. A disturbed murmur passed through the plaza. Did he mock the death of Leto II? They wondered if priest guards would rush out now and arrest the preacher. So, he's here to pay homage and preach in the memory of Leto Atreides II. And I would just point out, interestingly enough, that this is Leto III, again, that we're talking about technically. And there was something else I had actually thought of, was that we never really did get any kind of statement on the death of Leto II from Paul like this, I suppose. But this is the preacher at work here, and this is this is House Atreides at work, and this is the propaganda machine, if you like, in the preacher. So I'm here to give homage to preach in the memory of Leto II. I do it in compassion for all who suffer. I say to you what the dead Leto has learned. Say to you what the dead Leto has learned, that tomorrow has not yet happened and may never happen. Well, that's what the dead all learn, isn't it? That tomorrow won't come anymore because you're dead. This moment here is the only observable time and place for us in our universe. That's a hard no right there. If we understand when we look at the stars and how far away they are and what we're actually looking at, and when we're looking at them, then that's no. But again, let's make it about us, I suppose. It's the inner space versus the outer space, for want of a better term. So I tell you to learn that a government's growth and its death are apparent in the growth and death of its citizens. That's fair enough. A disturbed murmur passed through the plaza. Did he mock? Why is he? Doesn't sound like if he's saying anything particularly good about the memory of Leto Atreides II, but these are the lessons that he learned. So Alia knew. Oh, a disturbed murmur passed through the plaza. Did he mock the death of Leto II? They wondered if priest guards would rush out now and arrest the preacher. Let me just find that. So, I just put down here that that's the third person omniscient narrator there is apparent, if that makes sense. It's obvious that's what I would say when I think it's obvious, if you like, that they're not doing a good enough job at hiding themselves, if you like. Now, Alia knew that there'd be no such interruption of the preacher. It was her order that he be left unmolested on this day. She had disguised herself in a good still suit, with a moisture mask to conceal her nose and mouth, and a common hooded robe to hide her hair. She stood in the second row beneath the preacher, watching him carefully. So Alia has come to check him out. Second row beneath the preacher, not too far away. And we get some of Alia's thoughts here. Was this Paul? The years might have changed him thus, and he had always been superb with voice, a fact which made it difficult to identify him by his speech. Still, this preacher made his voice do what he wanted. Paul could not have done it better. She felt that she had to know his identity before she could act against him. How his words dazzled her. I've written at the top of this page, we're about to get some irony here, but Paul couldn't have done it better. The question is, could anybody do it better than Paul? I suppose. And if the answer is no, then logically this man is Paul. Now, she sensed no irony in the preacher's statement. He was using the seductive attraction of definite sentences uttered with a driving sincerity. People might stumble only momentarily at his meanings, realizing that he had meant them to stumble, teaching them in this fashion. Indeed, he picked up the crowd's response, saying, "Irony often masks the inability to think beyond one's assumptions. I am not being ironic. Ganima has said to you that the blood of her brother cannot be washed off. I concur." So that's Ganima's statement. He's agreeing with it. It will be said, sorry, bear with me a second, just I flip over here. It will be said that Leto has gone where his father went, has done what his father did. Muad'Dib's church says he chose in behalf. Hang on a second, I got a wee mistake here. Sorry, folks. Muad'Dib's church says he chose in behalf of his own humanity a course which might appear absurd and foolhardy. I think that should be on, shouldn't it? Muad'Dib's church says he chose on behalf of his own humanity a course which might appear absurd and foolhardy, but which history will validate. That history is being written even now. Sorry, bear with me a second. I've got a whole bunch of wee things around this paragraph. That history is being rewritten even now. Yeah, okie dokie. She sensed no irony in the preacher's statement. I thought it was a bit ironic. Was this Paul? I think she knows it's Paul. But she sensed no irony in the preacher's statement. What was that again? Let's jump back. So he's talking about the death. What he's talking about so far is compassion for those who suffer. The lessons that Leto has learned is that tomorrow might not happen, might never happen. The future might not come. Government's growth and death are apparent in the growth and death of its citizens. So in other words, I suppose the lives of your citizens are a barometer, if you like, for change for the government, if you like. If your citizens are doing poorly, it's inevitable that your government's going to end up doing poorly, whether it is at that time or not. Where are we? Sorry, I jumped back a little bit. Sense no irony, and then we get irony often makes the... there's something ironic about that, isn't there? She sensed no irony in his statement, and then he goes, irony often makes the inability. There's irony in his statement right there. Irony often masks the inability to think beyond one's assumptions. I'm not being ironic. Ganima has said to you that the blood of her brother cannot be washed off. I concur. It'll be said that where Leto has gone, where his father went, has done what his father did. Muad'Dib's church says he chose on behalf of his own humanity a course which might appear absurd and foolhardy, but which history will validate. That history is being rewritten even now. This is what the church says. I say to you that there is another lesson to be learned from these lives and their endings. Alia, alert to every nuance, asked herself why the preacher said endings instead of deaths. It's interesting, isn't it? Because, as we'll find out, we both know that Leto has gone where his father went. Well, his father is Paul. Paul's not dead. And we also know that Leto's not dead. So both of them have entered the realm of not being dead, if you like. There's a level of deception here, isn't there? I say there's another lesson to be learned from these lives and their endings, not deaths. And Alia picks up on this. I looked at every nuance, asked herself why the preacher said endings instead of deaths. Was he saying that one or both are now truly dead? How could that be? A truth-sayer had confirmed Ganim's story. What was this preacher doing then? Was he making a statement of myth or reality? Chaya, that's just jumping back a wee bit there, folks. Let me catch up with your comments. So they said the deified mind too. Isle was the animal. Oh, here we go. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chaya. Isle was the animal Abraham sacrificed in lieu of his son Yitzhak. That's Abraham and Isaac, isn't it? Right, yes, indeed. Thank you. Let's see, where do we put that? Ram. That was Isle. That's good. Oh, thank you very much. That's chatting with Chaya about stories from the Bible. I found we got one that I kind of know that's not in the Christian Bible, that is in the Hebrew Bible. I was able to get the next part of it, and it's fascinating how much the Christian Old Testament is sanitized and has removed so much interesting stuff from the Hebrew Old Testament, if you like. That's kind of, much as I picked myself up a copy of the Quran there, my next kind of text like that's going to be a Hebrew Old Testament for sure. I'm dying to find out what's in it, because some of it's particularly the older stories are fascinating. Isle was the animal Abraham sacrificed in lieu of his son Yitzhak. Thank you very much. That's going down here. That would remind you of the kind of Almathea, this kind of thing. Isle. Chaya, was it a ram then? Isle, the animal that Abraham sacrificed. I think it was a lamb. I don't know. Okay, animal. Sorry, bear with me, folks. Just get scribbling this down here. Thank you very much, chat. Excellent. I'm going to put down everything there. If it is a ram, that's an interesting thing. One of the archaeological artifacts that's found in Newgrange is something that looks like a mace, but it has a ram's head. It's probably a symbol of kingship, or else a weapon of ritual sacrifice from the time. The local historians don't have a clue really, but it lines up with a lot of things like that from certainly the Celtic worlds and the classical world. Interesting stuff. There's a gadfly element in the preach. Yes, indeed. Chai was saying mine has in behalf. When I actually looked at it and I thought it could be either, but I thought for it to flow better, it would be better, I think, if it was on. But if it's in behalf, it's in behalf. Thank you very much. And Chai saying the only time I recall the Church of Muad'Dib being right. Pardon me. Chose in behalf of his own humanity, a course which might appear absurd and foolhardy, but which history will validate. Fair enough. Yes, probably is, as you're saying, the only time they're being right. That history is being rewritten even now. The suggestion is that the priests are going to write this to suit themselves, to frame it in the way that they wish, So they say perhaps there's some irony here for Alia with the Baron in her. Is he dead? Is she? Or are these other endings? Yes, indeed. What the Baron's at in this chapter is interesting. Yeah. Is he dead? Is she? Yeah. Interesting, as I always point out, Cynthia, there's also a version of the Baron floating around inside Ganima, and there's a version of the Baron floating around inside Leto II as well. There's technically a triumvirate of dead barons about in this universe. He gets killed and appears in triplicate. Yes, indeed. Now let's see, where do we get to? Yeah, I actually kept it within myself because I wasn't 100% sure. It says he chose in behalf of his own humanity. It makes as much sense as on, but I would have went with on behalf of. I say too, there's another lesson to be learned from these lives and their endings. Sorry, let me just figure out no, this other lesson. Right. So Alia is going, why endings instead of deaths? Is he saying that they're both now truly dead? How could that be? It's the opposite, isn't it? A truthsayer had confirmed Ganima's story. There's another one of these things that these systems, crutches, tools of the schools, if for want of a better word, a truthsayer has many limitations as a mentat, I think. And we've learned that the guild steersmen, they have limitations. Yeah, everybody's got their limitations in this universe, or the things that they use that they treat as absolutes are badly flawed, that they're not. So was he making a statement of myth or reality? Now that's an interesting thing. Is he trying to build a myth? What is he doing? Or is this in actuality, are they both dead? Is he starting to build the story? I think is what the myth is. But myths are part reality. We're going to get to it actually at some point. I'm going to do this wee chat about some of the myths and rituals and things like that, things that Frank's discussing within the Dune series. I've got some fascinating stuff to read to you guys, so we're just going to do a day. I'll do it within the next few episodes, probably, where we're going to do the Children of Dune book club, but we're just going to dump all this info for you and give you read you some stuff, and we're going to include amongst that the stuff on Didier Anzu's Moapo of Leto, the second skin. So we have a paper called the Moapo of Leto Atreides II, which discusses the whole second skin, and we're going to read some of that stuff to you as well. So it's just to kind of give you a bit of a broader sense of some of the things that Frank's actually utilizing within his own work, if you like, and give you the lowdown on them, because it's some really good stuff. I've got some really fascinating things to read to you from Graves's introduction to the White Goddess, and in particular about how many of our myths survive in the form of poetic language, or that their major forms come from there, and that often the particular choice of any given word in any story that is mythical is there for a very important reason. And for example, the story that I was chatting with about Chai was about the vineyard that Noah plants. And I've kind of always had an interest in mythological stories about vineyards, things like that. There's quite a few. And I had one aspect of that story to understand that the story that's presented in a holy text that to all Christians is a seriously edited version of that story. And that it loses all of its character, that it also loses its input. And I think, from my point of view, it actually loses. For me, what it did was it lost several associations with other myths. And now that I kind of know the full story, my head's been pinging about it. It's that kind of thing. But there's an element of reality to myth. Myths are not things that did not happen. I can guarantee you that. There's stories that have developed out of things that have happened, and they can have a universal form, if you like, but they can also have local flavor. and things can, vary slightly from place to place. So is he making a myth, or is he making a reality, or is he talking about reality? I think it's the first one here. So the preacher here, we have, note this other lesson well. The preacher thundered, lifting his arms. If you would possess your humanity, let go of the universe. Now, I've written next to this a couple of things. I've written nonsense, ? Paradoxically stupid, ? Or more than likely, Zen is where I would kind of go with that, I think. And this is what Paul's going to do, by the way. Ultimately, I suppose a bit of a spoiler alert if anybody doesn't want to know Paul's fate. Mute for 5 seconds. But essentially, he's going to abandon the golden path because he wishes to hang on to his humanity. If you possess your humanity, let go of the universe. It's about him very much, I think, and it's also about Leto II, and it's also the citizens of the universe, if you like. To possess your humanity, to own it, let go of the universe. Now, if that letting go of stuff is generally the way Zen, I think, works. Let it go. Don't let it bother you. This kind of thing. I don't really agree with looking at life that way at all. I don't let things go. I don't forget about them. I don't bury them. They're part of me. And when you learn lessons in life, whether they're good or bad, they stay with you. To possess your humanity, letting it all go. Maybe that's what you do at the end of life, if you like. But you're a part of the universe, whether you like it or not. And I think to understand your own humanity, to possess your own humanity, you kind of have to look at your own place in the universe and try to figure out the great universal question, which I have refined and defined myself, which is what the fuck is going on? if you want to know, the whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the 42 thing is the answer, but they discuss about what you never really knew what the question was. The universal question, I think, is the important was what the hell's going on? End of story. Because I have no idea whatsoever, and I haven't met a single person on this earth who has it either. So I don't know. It's a philosophical statement, if you like. We don't need to take it too literally. If you would possess your humanity, we should all be in possession of our humanity, whatever we like to think that may be. It's an interesting term when we use humanity. We go to humane treatment and stuff like that. Inhumane, I don't know. Human treatment can be pretty awful. Sometimes, So I don't know if you think about it as to possess your humanity, let go of the universe. If you let go of the universe, you would be let going of yourself too, I think. And that's just me, but you can let things go. You can let them slide if you like, but to totally forget about them, I think it's removing a part of yourself that learned from those lessons. That's your brain stores certain things for a reason. You have certain, I know over a long term, it's pretty much your good memories and your bad ones. There's seldom the in betweens fit in. It's an interesting thing to think about. I've been thinking about a lot about the past, memory. The present, the ever and only present, and then the future things that are ahead. Quite a bit lately. I'm getting a bit philosophical about it. Let me just catch up with your comments there, folks. See what time I can call. So there's perhaps there's some irony here for Alia with the Baron and her. Is he dead? Is she? Or are these other endings? Chai was saying it's a ram or a deer or hind. Well, that's even more interesting then. Hang on, I'm going back here. Thank you. Yeah. Either of those animals is very, very interesting. It's a ram. The ram bit ties in with our translation of that word, isn't it? Ram is sacrifice. It's a ram or a deer or hind. Depending on the vowelization, as a root, it's a connotation of strengthen or being strong and powerful. Ram, strong, mature animal. Hind, speedy. Oak, strong tree. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And that's the sort of thing I've started to realize, trying about the Semitic languages. I've kind of often wondered what's the, with in terms of ancient books and stuff, what's the problem with, why do we have so much interpretation available? And it's because of the way your language is constructed, um, depending on vowelization. I think it's the language part of it's become a lot more interesting to me. But in particular, yes, animals like that, ram, deer, hind, etc., and generally with human sacrifice and the substitution of these animals for a human sacrifice in particular, that's really interesting. As I said, I'm absolutely flabbergasted with that myth that we were talking about, the first vineyard, getting the whole story of it. And I kind of, this is where it starts to bug me, is that I've got a let's say just a Christian Bible that's presented me with they've just censored, chopped, cut, farted all over the bloody story. That's so interesting, taken all its key elements out and left you with just like, oh, hold up a towel over your dad or something like that. Just unbelievable. The chopping and changing of it, and it's I hate that, because the older the story, these kind of things, that if you do look into them, approach them. We were talking about this, approaching it as myth, as history, all sorts of things. Seeing what you can try to find out about it. When you change a single word of a story like that, you can really affect its meaning and its importance. We're sort of saying one of the things that Graves would sort of point out too is, you can have 10 villages, say, across like 10 miles of coast, and all these 10 villages worship 10, they all, let's just say they all worship Zeus. The thing of interest isn't that they all worship Zeus. The thing that that's not the thing that you should look at if you wanted to understand the peoples. What you should look at is the rituals and the myths that they have, how they vary. So the 10 different villages will worship Zeus, but they'll have a slight variation. They'll have their own rituals that they tie into their daily life, this kind of thing. And it's that variation and why, but it's hugely important, And that there, the use of that word ayil, the sacrifice that day, all of this really gives a much bigger, a depth of meaning to this chapter, doesn't it? That this is the day ayil, the sacrifice to commemorate the death which made his presence real and pleasant. This is the sacrifice of Leto, the sacrifice of Paul, this kind of thing. And again, it's the Chaya was saying there that as the deer and the hind, the connotations of strength, strong, power, but these animals are also associated with kingship, with political power, as well. Ram, strong, mature. Yeah, when I was down in Newgrange, they've no idea what this ram's head thing was for or anything. And we've got so many stories. Zeus was suckled by a she goat. Is the Almathea, isn't it? From her forehead is the horn of plenty, the cornucopia. This is also the same animal that carried Phrixus and Hellas to escape their wicked stepmother, where she fell off it and ended up in the sea. That's called the Hellespont. That same animal is the animal that becomes the golden fleece of Jason and the Argonauts, And wow, there's a whole pile. We could go on. I could go on for days about this kind of stuff. It's interesting, but thank you so much. Jude saying, be right back. You all dinner with my grandmother, who's just finished the entire Dune cycle. Excellent. Well done, Granny. I'll be back soon. Enjoy your dinner, Julian. So yeah, these things are hugely important, I think. I'm really looking for, Graves' white goddess, particularly looking at sort of aspects of the Celtic female divinities, if you like, triple goddesses and stuff. And the other thing in particular, looking at poetry and stuff like tree alphabets and stuff. I'll have a chat with you all about it at some point. I want to get finished the book myself, Let's see, where do we get to, folks? Yes, the irony, endings, the preacher, the other lesson. Well, yeah. If you would possess your humanity, let go of the universe. So I think that the whole let go, if you've got to let go of things sometimes, that's the kind of Zen Buddhist philosophy, isn't it? And we have a bit of, I think Frank sort of I think he's a bit eclectic in his religious tastes, but I think he does at a certain point drift towards Zen Buddhism. I think not a thing I agree with, by the way. If you're a possessor, you humanity, hang on to the universe is what I would say, and hang on tight. So he lowered his arms, pointed his empty sockets directly at Alia. He seemed to be speaking intimately to her, an action so obvious that several around her turned to peer inquiringly in her direction. Alia shivered at the power in him. And Alia's thoughts here, this could be Paul. It could. And we've been going with the kind of the ideas, how could she not know, I suppose. Especially with how close the two have been, how intimate they've been, this kind of thing. And this is the chapter, I suppose, where we have that reveal. This could be Paul. It could. So here's the preacher. But I realize that humans cannot bear very much reality, he said. Most lives are a flight from selfhood. Most prefer the truths of the stable. You stick your heads into the stanchions and munch until you die. Others use you for their purposes. Not once do you live outside the stable to lift your head and be your own creature. Muad'Dib came to tell you about that. Without understanding his message, you cannot revere him. Now, I didn't know the word stanchion, so I had to look it up. So a stanchion is an upright bar, post, or support, and it's a device that fits loosely around the neck of an animal and limits forward and backward motion in stalls. Pardon me. It's also metal parts of a ship, by the way. Oh, here, hang on. No, that's the next thing. That's a munch. Sorry. But basically, it's the thing that keeps cows in place, if you like, when they're milking. They're being milked by the milking machines. That's what a stanchion is. The munch is to eat something loudly. There we go. So what he's saying here, most lives are a flight from selfhood. Much prefer the truths of the stable. You stick your heads into the stanchions and munch until you die. He's basically saying that they're like cattle, to be milked and fetid, which is kind of a weird thing. To call people cattle, this kind of thing, is a pretty insulting thing to do. I think it's also pretty insulting to the moose, as I like to call them. I love cows. I walk the dogs up past a whole couple of fields of cows pretty much every day. We say hello to the moose, thank them for their dairy goodness. And we chat with them. Mainly it's to try to socialize the dogs with them a bit. And a couple of times, so it's a good probably a mile down the road. But sometimes we get to the top of the hill and the cows in the field, and we'll say hello, and then we'll walk back down again. We call it the road to nowhere. But the cows will follow us all. They'll come with us. It's good fun when they do that. They'll all pile down and just sort of stick their heads over and keep walking along with us. It's a good laugh. So I'm fond of cows. To call people cattle, has been part and parcel of some cultures' racism. It's been part of South Africa's racist culture in the past as well. This kind of thing. It's an attempt to dehumanize people. It's just saying you're just out to eat, be milked and die, basically. But I suppose the point is he's saying that most people prefer the truths of the stable. You stick your heads into the stanchions and munch until you die. Others use you for their purposes. Not once do you live outside the stable to lift your head and be your own creature. Muad'Dib came to tell you about that. Without understanding his message, you cannot revere him. So get your heads out of the mob, lift up, have a look around, and go have a good life is apparently what we're being told here. But he's poking at his audience, isn't he, by suggesting that they're cattle. And we're told earlier that this is how he's going about his business, by the way. People might stumble momentarily at his meanings, realizing that he had meant them to stumble, teaching them in this fashion. So he's poking at the crowd. This would be what, the stumble of the crowd should be, did he just call us cattle? that kind of thing. So someone in the throng, I've got to keep doing, I've got one of these, but one of my throngs is a thong. I wonder if I've just changed it, but there we go. Somewhere in the throng, possible, sorry. Let me just catch up again. Sorry. Someone in the throng, possible a priest in disguise, is what I have. I've got an arrow pointing at that with a question mark. I think it should be possibly. Maybe somebody could check that for me. Possible a priest in disguise makes no sense. Someone in the throng, yeah, it should be possibly, shouldn't it? Possibly. A priest in disguise could stand no more. His hoarse male voice was lifted in a shout. You don't live the life of Muad'Dib. How dare you tell others how they must revere him? I've written next to that now. That's irony. The big exclamation mark signed with my name, Russ. How dare you tell others? You don't do this. How dare you? Yeah. You don't tell others how they must revere him. I'm telling him not. So here we have the preacher is because he's dead, the preacher bellowed. That's a lie, isn't it? Alia turned to see who had challenged the preacher. The man remained hidden from her, but his voice came over the intervening heads in another shout. If you believe him truly dead, then you are alone from this time forward! Exclamation mark. This is often the kind of logic of this kind of speech. If you say one thing, then I speak for everyone here. I'm alienating you. That's excommunication, is what the priest is attempting to do there. You're alone. You stand alone. You're a heretic, if you like. And being a heretic is a good thing, isn't it? Alia's thoughts here, surely it was a priest, Alia thought, but she failed to recognize the voice. So we have the preacher again. I come only to ask a simple question, the preacher said. Is Muad'Dib's death to be followed by the moral suicide of all men? Is that the inevitable aftermath of a Messiah? I think that's I've actually put at the top of this page, given it a wee heading of its own. And the heading I have at the top is the inevitable aftermath of a Messiah. Is Muad'Dib's death to be followed by the moral suicide of all men? Is that the inevitable aftermath of a Messiah? I would say sometimes it's a prelude to a Messiah, isn't it? If you're looking for a Messiah, an anointed one, this kind of thing, but if just someone's basically come along and sort out all your problems for you, surely within that there is some kind of moral, how would you put it, I don't know what's the term I'm looking for, moral abstention at the very least, in your situation in life, how to deal with your problems, whatever it is, even if it's a larger world viewpoint. To expect someone to come along and sort out your problems it's not a good way of thinking. It's you're not trying to pick yourself up. Does that make sense? What we've got is the death, is Muad'Dib's death to be followed by the moral suicide of all men. Is that the inevitable the inevitable aftermath of a Messiah? So if we go with that, we do equate that Muad'Dib is a Messiah. So if a Messiah gets killed, does everybody, is there a moral suicide of all men afterwards? I would say there's some, not of all men, but certainly a little bit of it beforehand, I would think. Afterwards, quite possibly. And it must be severely problematic to watch your chosen one, your Messiah, your whatever, die. And it's like, if you see what I mean. It's an interesting question they ask. I suppose it's better really just to consider what is the impact of on a society, or what is an impact on a group of people who have expectations of a messianic figure, and then have that Messiah inevitably die, as all men do, and then what are their expectations after? If you see what I mean, is it an abandonment of your moral self, if you like, to seek such things? It's almost in a funny way easily connected, I think, to the idea of prescience, if you like, to know what's going to happen. Is it, if the desire to have that is in some way to probably ensure that only the good things happen to you, that you only take the right choices, and that nothing bad would happen to you, that you'd be able to avoid the perils in your future. It would leave you a very bland person, wouldn't it? With no edge to you at all. And unfortunately, as we often point out, not that we like to, is that bad things that happen to you sometimes help you as a person, if you see what I mean. I'm a prime example of that. That the whole "what does not kill you makes you stronger." I wouldn't quite go that far. What does not kill you can leave you bloody annoyed quite a lot, I think. But you're not dead at the end of the day. On you go, learn from it. Shit happens, you know. The only other thing I'd point out is that this is a horrifically violent and arguably amoral universe. Despite the level of religion that's in it, certainly within the upper echelons of society, the greater houses, all of that kind of stuff, that they look like amoralists to me. I think we're actually told that at some point, aren't we? Or is it maybe it's a? Oh no, is it the Tyraxi where they just one of the groups is described as intellectual amoralists? I think I can't remember who. Someone in the possibly Cynthia. Thank you. Yeah, it's not. I've got possible. Let me just. I couldn't be possibly. Possible. Sorry, it's possibly. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. That's what I suspected. Possible. There we go. You're all right. Okay. Let me get some fluids here, folks. So it's an interesting question. Just because Muad'Dib's dead, does that mean you've all abandoned your morality? Is that inevitable in the death of a Messiah? And so here comes the logic of the priest and the crowd. Then you admit him Messiah, the voice from the crowd shouted. Why not? Since I'm the prophet of his times, the preacher asked. There was such a calm assurance in his tone and manner that even his challenger fell silent. The crowd responded with a disturbed murmur, a low animal sound. Taking that on from the kind of cattle stanchions and munch suggestions earlier. Yes, the preacher repeated, I am the prophet of these times. So I've just scribbled down, Paul is a Messiah here, Paul is a prophet, and they did deify him, which technically makes him a god. Though in this aspect, I think, as the preacher, this is the bit where Paul's godhood would sort of ultimately have failed him, I think. In his perceived death, that's where his godhood would have failed, and that would leave him to be a Messiah and a prophet for the one to come, if you like, which is usually the way things work out. With these kind of things, usually, he's the wrong guy, but he's the prophet for the next one, this kind of thing. So, but yeah, if we want to run that, he's his prophet, he's the Messiah, and he's also been, we talk about his deification at the very, very start of this chapter, don't we? It recognized the deified Paul Atreides as that person. So Paul Atreides as God. So Paul is a Messiah. Let me just see, that's my own wee notes there, isn't it? Right, okay. So Alia, concentrating on him, detected the subtle inflections of voice. He certainly controlled the crowd. And I've written next to that, her too, question mark. Was he Bene Gesserit trained? He knows the voice, probably. Was this another ploy of the Missionaria Protectiva? I've written at this point, is she blind and is she deluded? I wonder why I wrote that at that point. Not Paul at all, but just another part of the endless power game? Question mark. These are questions, and I've written beneath that, paranoid. So it's just my own kind of thoughts as I was running through. I scribbled them down as I was writing it. He certainly controlled the crowd. She's in the crowd. Was he Bene Gesserit trained? Was this another ploy of the Missionary Protective? I'm kind of just going to she blind here. She deluded. Not Paul at all, but just another part of the endless power game. So at this point, as I was reading, I was going, how can she not know? And then I've just thrown in a little bit of paranoid. But this is the chapter that kind of deals with that, actually. So the preacher now, I articulate the myth and the dream, the preacher shouted. Oh, I should say something about that. I'll finish it first. I articulate the myth and the dream, the preacher shouted. I am the physician who delivers the child and announces that the child is born. Yet I come to you at a time of death. Does that not disturb you? It should shake your souls. Even as she felt anger at his words, Alia understood the pointed way of his speech. With others, she found herself edging closer up the steps, crowding towards this tall man in desert garb. His young guide caught her attention. How bright-eyed and saucy the lad appeared. Would Muad'Dib employ such a cynical youth? Right, so let's just stop a bit. Before we pile on any further, I need to just highlight that wee bit there. That's the Baron emerging there, by the way, right at the end. The young guide caught her attention. And then the next thing is how bright-eyed and saucy the lad appeared, with an exclamation mark. Would Muad'Dib employ such a cynical youth? Question mark. And I've just written, that's the Baron. Now, just jumping back, I suppose, I articulate the myth and the dream. I just wanted to say this within the whole kind of Jungian, Freudian psychology, psychoanalysis kind of thing. It's interestingly a thing that most people have a problem with science fiction. When they try to answer the question, what's the first science fiction book? And we have a lot of people who have bothered understanding that these stories exist in the ancient world. But then we have a lot of people who have a bit of bother understanding that we have another category of stories in the ancient world, which are called myths. As it Northrop Frye would tell you that science fiction shares, I can't remember the exact quote, it's in my PhD somewhere. Science fiction is so many, many things in common with myth, but it is not myth. And so in terms of our candidates for early science fiction books, some people choose mythical stories because they might have a flying city in it or something like this. They're not science fiction, if that makes sense. They're myths, and that's a whole different thing. Psychology's big problem, and psychoanalysis, psychiatry, all of its big problem is the equation of dream and myth that exists within the two schools of thought, the Jungian and the Freudian schools, if you like. It's simple. It's the same articulation of the same problem and the same solution. Dreams are not myths. End of story. And that's the real problem for the whole that school of Freudian thought, and it's the same problem for the Jungian thought. It's where you get all the iconotropy that appears in both of these the disciplines, shall we say, these subjects. But they articulate the myth and the dream, the preacher shouted. Sorry, it's just something that got me chomping at the bit there, and I just thought I'd deal with it. But they're not the same thing. And science fiction books are not myths, mythical books, or books that deal with mythology, whether epic poems or whatever. They're not science fiction stories either. So it's an important thing to understand when you start going down to look for the first science fiction stories, proto-science fiction, and it's why Lucian probably makes the best candidate. Plato's Republic could come in there, but it's actually not it's not a science fiction book in that way, but it is a speculative work. But it's a work of philosophy, if you like. So political philosophy. Pardon me. So sorry, dreams and myth and sci-fi. There's a relationship, a triangle there, if you like, where two are often articulated with the other, or confused with the other, if you like. And there's a strong. They're all three are completely different things, but they have a lot of similarities. It's interesting. So we have the physician's metaphor there as well. I take the myth and the dream. Okay, the preacher shouted, "Here he does." So I'm the physician. So it's like delivering a baby and announcing child is born, yet I come to you at the time of death. So it's like saying, I got the sense that somebody gives birth, in a room, and you bring out the child and the mother's dead. That we've had that with Chani, or it could be just that a child is born in a situation where there's lots of death around you. New life at a time of death. Does that not disturb you? Probably. It should shake your souls. I would say that new life in a time of death is a thing of great optimism, great hope, if you see what I mean. Welcome to the world, little soul, this kind of thing. And I hope you do well. It's not a nice place. But it disturbs you. It would be disturbing to see new life born out of so much death, if you like. I suppose an interesting thing for me is that was it 9/11 in America when the Twin Towers thing was happening? A bit of a time difference here. My cousin in Australia gave birth to twins. I think between the two towers, but certainly by the time both towers were down, she had twin kids. If you see what I mean. And it's always I'll never forget their birthday, if you understand me. Twin Towers isn't the thing that affected my life. But we all saw it on the TV, and it was like a horrific attack and stuff. But it's, for me, they're intrinsically linked forever in my memory. Whenever these twin things were destroyed and all these people died, that's when my two second cousins, second nephews, or whatever, nephew and niece. That's when they were born. So I'll never forget their birthday. I'm sure neither would they, to be honest with you. Yes, indeed. Sorry. Right. Let's see. Where are we? So the physician's metaphor, I get it something like that. He articulates the myth and the dream. I've got some good news amongst lots of bad news. It should shake your souls. Alia's feeling anger. But understanding how this speech thing is working. She finds herself edging closer. It's drawing the crowd in, crowding towards his tall man's desert garb. And then his young guide caught her attention. How bright-eyed and saucy the lad appeared. We got an exclamation mark slammed on that. Would Muad'Dib employ such a cynical youth? Question mark. And I've just written... it's the second time we've heard the boy described as cynical, isn't it? I would tell you that means dog-like, though I don't think he is. I think it's just more in his demeanour. But that's the Baron. That's the Baron's lust appearing, isn't it? It's a bizarre thing to say, bright-eyed and saucy. It sounds like it's out of a Carry On film, doesn't it? Dear, oh dear. There's Objet de Grib, if I said that correctly, saying, good to see you well, Doc. I was down the Glens today. Spectacular. Enjoy that Siggy Schlonda. Thank you very much, sir. Or possibly, man. I don't know your gender at all, but thanks, Objet de Grib. I shouldn't presume. Yes, indeed. Thanks very much. I was we walk up the country, just been with the dogs. I wasn't able to get even out with them for about a week. It's been lovely weather today. Yeah, blue skies and nice breeze off the Atlantic. But we're getting a hell of a temperature drop in the evenings, Up here, we're down to about between 2 and -2 some nights at the moment. But yeah, it's on our way to summer. I'm loving it. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. Down the Glens today. I was chatting with the wife about heading up that way at some point. Just to get around them again. I was actually saying we're talking about a couple of towns that I grew up in. well, I grew up in a lot of towns, but just wanting to get up and sort of see them and just chatting about the changes and stuff, you know. But yes, indeed. But I was like, I wanted to do a wee coastal drive and maybe go for lunch or something. And I don't know if you know Ballygally Castle Hotel. That's a nice wee spot. Quite like that. Just just at the end of the glen, or is it the start? I always get that mixed up. But yeah, if anybody doesn't know, the Glens are the Glens of Antrim, which is kind of the northeast coast of Northern Ireland. Is was it they call it an area of outstanding natural beauty on a World Heritage Site, isn't it? Summer is coming to hell, the winter. I always thought you would get that somewhere in the Game of Thrones, is that someone might have a sarky comeback for winter is coming. And we just said to tell your winter to f off. As in Glenarm, the Carnoustie. Glenarm. I used to drive through Glenarm all the time. Yes, indeed. I love the Glens. They're gorgeous. Don't get round that side of the Carnlough. I had friends that used to live there. Actually, yeah, used to pop down to Carnlough a fair bit. It's a nice wee part of the world. Nice to drive around. Let's see. So where did we get to? Yes, indeed, the Barons popped up there. So I mean, on we go from this. Does that not disturb you? It should shake your souls. We had that little bit with Alia in between. I mean to disturb you, the preacher shouted. It is my intention. I come here to combat the fraud and illusion of your conventional, institutionalized religion. As with all such religions, your institution moves towards cowardice. It moves towards mediocrity, inertia, and self-satisfaction. So, I present to you a metaphor of a physician delivering a child amongst much death, if you like. Does that disturb you? Well, I'm here to disturb you. Let me tell you, it's what I intend to do, and I'm here to muck about with and combat. I'm here to kick over. I'm here to be iconoclastic, isn't it? I'm going to kick over your conventions, your institutions, your religion. And with like all religions, your institution moves towards cowardice. It moves towards mediocrity, inertia, and self-satisfaction. Pardon me. There's something oxymoronic about something moving towards inertia. Does that make sense? You know, maybe that's just me. So the institutions, the things that you build up around, you know, this religion, the rules, the dogma, all the buildings, the whole, all of it, the bricks and mortar, if you like, moves toward cowardice, toward mediocrity, mediocre, inertia, and self-satisfaction. I don't know, to kind of see that sort of behavior, he's not altogether wrong, is he? You need to kind of look at religions that have been around a long time, you know, and ultimately Christianity has been on the back foot, I think, for a long time. It's gone from being, you know, a brutal, extreme, authoritarian parasite that sucks the sucks the money out of the poor while pretending to do all sorts of things. It's gone to being a very cowardly, quiet, in the background, ineffectual group of people that are happy now to change their dogma and their rules. Well, this is Christianity we're talking about, to suit your needs, your moral needs, because your moral needs have changed and theirs don't. A good example of this was it recently the Catholic, not that long ago, but basically the Catholic Church, all, you know, your dogs and cats were going to hell. What, you know, they don't go to heaven. People got really upset about that. You know, why not? You know, this kind of thing, and it forced the Catholic Church to kind of went, okay, you know, for 2,000 years, dogs have gone to hell, but we've changed our mind, and they're all good puppies go to heaven now, which is a good thing, I think. But it's that's what he's saying. All such religions. I'm here to combat the fraud and the illusion that the religion presents. It moves towards cowardice, mediocrity, inertia, and self-satisfaction. Angry murmur, and again, if look to your institutions, look to the people, this kind of thing. Angry murmurs began to arise in the center of the throng, and this is the one I've got, thong. As I've written next to this, I've got thong in the book. Dear oh dear, I was laughing about this. I was a wee bit tired when I was scribbling some of these notes, and I didn't want to make mistakes. Getting better with my sleep and stuff like that, but I actually thought it was my tiredness and my filthy old mind. Angry murmurs began to arise in the center of the thong, and then I went, that's clearly throng, Russell, and it is thong. Just to show you, there we go. We gotta focus. There we go. The center of the thong. Every other instance is throng, but there we go. I was wondering where it would occur. So the crowd, angry murmurs began to rise at the center of the throng. Alia felt the tensions and gloatingly wondered if there might not be a riot. Again, I was wondering, was that the Baron? Could the preacher handle those tensions? If not, he could die right here. The priest, this is the preacher now, the priest who challenged me, the preacher called, pointing into the crowd. Alia's thoughts now. He knows, Alia thought. A thrill ran through her, almost sexual in its undertones. The preacher played a dangerous game, but he played it consummately. I don't know what to put about that one. I've written either is that, it says almost sexual in its undertones. He knows. And I've put down incest ? The Baron ? I wasn't too sure about that one. And the word almost, a thrill ran through her. He knows. The preacher played a dangerous game, but he played it consummately. That last bit sort of made me more think of the Baron, I suppose. But then I was wondering, is that actually part of her thought process there? Is that maybe our third person omniscient nature sort of popping the head up again there? So, you priest in your mufti, the preacher called, you are a chaplain to the self-satisfied. I come not to challenge Muad'Dib, but to challenge you. Is your religion real when it costs you nothing and carries no risk? Is your religion real when you fatten upon it? Is your religion real when you commit atrocities in its name? Whence comes your downward degeneration from the original revelation? Answer me, priest. And I've got a big exclamation mark slammed on there. I quite like that. We've got those three questions there, all framed in the same way. Is your religion real when? Is your religion real when? So when it costs you nothing, carries no risk. Is it real when you fatten upon it? Is it real when you commit atrocities in its name? Whence comes your downward degeneration from the original revelation? Answer me. So what has brought you so low, if you like, from whatever it was that you were told in the first place? How have you fallen so far? You've got no risk. You risk nothing. It's your, this goes back to the self-satisfaction. But like the cattle that we were told about on the stanchions and munch. No risk. This goes back into the crowds as well. What we can see about them relates to the crowd, I suppose, too. To the priesthood, as much as that. Do you fatten upon it? When you commit atrocities in its name, then I suppose that's the real problem. Whence comes your downward? And answer me, priest. And if he's using the voice, this is interesting, I think. And we get this big exclamation mark at the end of that. Answer me, priest. But the challenger remains silent. And I was a wee bit confused about that, because I thought if that's the voice, and we've been told by Alia, that whoever this is, It could be Paul because of the way they use their voice. How his words dazzled her, Paul could not have, what was it we're told? Paul could not have done it better. So it probably is him. Why doesn't sorry, that was my question. Answer me, priest. The challenger remains silent. If he's using voice, why does the priest not answer him? And I actually thought it's possible that if you used voice on this guy like this, that he had no answer. If that makes sense, and that's why he remains silent. I don't know. It's a little mystery. I'd love to know your thoughts on it, folks. But why does the challenger remain silent? It could be that Paul's not using the voice, but I would doubt that very much. The evidence that we have before that suggests that he's using it on the crowd. But the challenger remains silent, and Alia noted the crowd once more was listening with avid submission to the preacher's every word. By attacking the priesthood, he had their sympathy. And if her spies were correct, this man was Muad'Dib. So that's the bit where I've written next to it an admission. Oh, hang on one sec, gotta watch that mouse there. There we go. If her spies were correct, this man was Muad'Dib. It's an admission that it's Paul by her spies anyway. I think that she's got more than enough evidence, more than enough understanding to know that it's him, but there's a level of self-denial here. It's going to end in this chapter. And that it's Alia's bubble's going to burst, basically. Because I suppose it's going to be a difference in reality, isn't it? So I'll explain that, I think, when we get there. The preacher. The son of Muad'Dib risked, the preacher shouted, and Alia heard tears in his voice. Muad'Dib risked. They paid their price. And what did Muad'Dib achieve? A religion which is doing away with him. We've got a whole range of bangeria going on in there. We've got 4 exclamation marks. This would be a powerful moment if we visualized it. The son of Muad'Dib risked. It would be a big shouting statement. If you were filming this ad and the special effect of voice on the whole crowd, I heard tears in his voice. Interesting. Muad'Dib risked. Another short, punchy statement with a big. He's shouting. They paid their price. And what did Muad'Dib achieve? A religion which is doing away with him. The religion doesn't need him. And Alia's thoughts here are how different those words if they came from Paul himself. Alia thought, I must find out. And it really does change everything. If the preacher, I suppose the two realities are for her that the preacher says all these things, and that gives them a certain level of meaning. If the preacher is not Paul, everything that's been said by the preacher, the meaning of it is ramped up and amplified and changed if the person actually talking here is Paul. That there's a huge level of irony within what he says, I suppose. Even saying that, and even within the book, then that gives us a sense of dramatic irony, doesn't it? And we're in that position where we know better as readers. So it's interesting to see how her thought process works, that how she's kind of denied what it seems is of it. It's up to the point where she couldn't possibly get any more information given to her to suggest that the preacher is Paul, unless she walks right up to him and asks him at this point. Everything suggests it's him, and her spies are now saying that it's him. He's Muad'Dib. If there's a person whose abilities are better than Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, we would know who that person is, most likely. And the only person that kind of pops to mind is Hazimir Fenring, if you see what I mean. And it's clearly not him. So the son of Muad'Dib risked. They paid their price, both of them. And what did Muad'Dib achieve? A religion which is doing away with him. How different those words if they came from Paul himself. Alia thought, I must find out. She moved closer, up the steps, and others moved with her. She pressed through the throng until she could almost reach out and touch this mysterious prophet. She smelled the desert on him, a mixture of spice and flint. Both the preacher and his young guide were dusty, as though they'd recently come from the blade. She could see where the preacher's hands were deeply veined along the skin, protruding from the wrist seals of his stillsuit. She could see that one finger of his left hand had worn a ring. The Atreides hawk, which now reposed in Sietch Tabr. Leto would have worn it had he lived, or had she permitted him to ascend the throne. A little bit of her villainy still hanging on there. Had she permitted him to ascend the throne? Now, here we go. Oh, a fair wee bit to go yet, actually. Hang on. I thought we were getting it. Oh, not too much. Now, again, the preacher aimed his empty sockets at Alia, spoke intimately, but with a voice which carried across the throng. Muad'Dib showed you two things, a certain future and an uncertain future. With full awareness, he confronted the ultimate uncertainty of the larger universe. He stepped off blindly from his position on this world. He showed us that men must do this always, choosing the uncertain instead of the certain. His voice, Alia noted, took on a pleading tone at the end of his statement. So, he showed you two things, a certain future and an uncertain future. One, I suppose, is with the prescience, one without it, if you like. With full awareness, he confronted the ultimate uncertainty of the larger universe. He stepped off blindly from his position on this world. He showed us that men must do this always, choosing the uncertain instead of the certain. Now, it's really interesting, if you like, but let me think about this. He showed us that men must do this, choosing the uncertain instead of the certain. He confronted the ultimate uncertainty of the larger universe, the uncertain future, if you like. He stepped off from his position on this world. Stepped off blindly. He showed us that men must do this always. I would have went with he stepped off blindly into the world where he had a certain future. That's what his prescience gave him. But this is what he showed the people were being told. And Muad'Dib showed you two things. What a future looks like with prescience, I suppose, and what one doesn't. He confronted the ultimate uncertainty of the larger universe. He did blindly from his position on this world. He showed us that men must do this always, choosing the uncertain instead of the certain. So that's the lesson, is that what we should do is choose the uncertain future, not the one that has certainty. The one that has certainty is probably death, if you see what I mean. It's interesting here. Let me just catch up with you here. Cynthia's got a wee comment about this text here. My text has, and if her spies were correct, most of the pilgrims and Fremen on Arrakis. Oh, right, hang on. Have I missed? Actually, that might be me. So the problem is planet-wide, not just the current scene in the temple. Let's see, have I left out a bit of wordage here? I've done that before, Cynthia. Thank you very much. Let me just check. Things of spies were correct. Right. Oh, it's just before. Right. 35. Have I made a... Yeah, that's my mistake, Cynthia. Excuse me. There you go. That's the old terms. Thank you very much. I've got to get better at this. It doesn't happen too often. Yeah, I've missed a wee bit there. And if her spies were correct, most of the pilgrims and Fremen on Arrakis believed this man was Muad'Dib. Yeah, thank you. I've left out a wee bit there. Apologies, folks. Let me just scribble out. Most of the pilgrims and Fremen on Arrakis believed. Yeah, let me just scribble this up. Right. Comma. Right, okay. Sorry about that, folks. Let me just quickly scribble that in. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Most of the pilgrims and Fremen on Arrakis. Believed, right, that's it, believed. Okay, that goes in there. There we are. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, that was my mistake. What's that? Thank you very much. Yeah, that was my one, I'm afraid. Admission is this point. By attacking the priesthood, he had their sympathy, and if her spies were correct, most of the pilgrims and Fremen on Arrakis believed this man was Muad'Dib. Yeah, thank you very much. So the problem is planet-wide, not just the current scene in the temple. Thank you very much. Cynthia, I'd left a wee bit of that out. Yes, indeed. I suppose the point I was making, if that's what, but before I left that, but if her spies were correct, this man, most of the pilgrims of Fremen Arrakis believed this man was Muad'Dib. I'd probably go that then probably so do her spies as well. You know, but I go, yeah, it's. I think it's as much at that point. I think a mission it is, Paul. Possibly, I'll change that. It's not, is it? But it's people believe. It is Paul. Yeah, pretty much almost everybody who's there for any good reason whatsoever believe that this is Muad'Dib. Thank you very much. Sorry, folks, that was my mistake. It happens every now and then. I'm getting a bit happened more recently than later, than earlier, I think. But I'll have to keep a wee eye out for that. I've got into the habit now of telling myself off if I'm writing notes that if I'm tired to stop and go get a rest, basically. But I'm very bad at knowing when to put the pen down. Right. Okay. So we've got that whole thing. There's you can see the ring where possibly the ring should be, etc., etc. Let's see. Oh yeah, went forward a little bit. Where are we? Yeah, that bit about the certain future and the uncertain future. Ultimately, it's that men should. He showed us that men must do this always, stepping blindly up, but choosing the uncertain instead of the certain. How did he show us that? By choosing the certain, if you like, by going with the prescience, what not to do, I suppose. Again, his voice took on a pleading tone at the end of his statement. There's earnestness in his emotions here, I suppose. Whether that's an aspect of voice or not, I don't know. She glanced around. Alia glanced around, slipped a hand onto the hilt of her crysknife. Let me get her thoughts here. If I killed him right now, what would they do? Again, she felt a thrill rush through her. If it killed him and revealed myself, let me just check that I've written that down correctly. If I killed him, yeah, I didn't. There we go. If I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as an impostor and heretic. That doesn't quite flow right either, does it? Let me see if that's me again. If I killed him right now, what would they do? Question mark. Again, she felt thrill rush through it. If I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as impostor and heretic. It's funny that I think there's no problem there. I've written it down correctly, but it doesn't seem to flow quite well. Let me just read it from the book again. Alia glanced around, slipped a hand onto the hilt of her crysknife. If I killed him right now, what would they do? Again, she felt a thrill rush through her. If I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as impostor and heretic. We've got an exclamation mark. There's I wonder is there something missing from my copy there? Probably something. Could you tell me there? What would they, if I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as impostor and heretic? Maybe it's just a sort of unleft statement in relation to the previous question. What would they do? It doesn't. Doesn't seem to flow very well for me. And it's got that exclamation mark at the end. I don't know. Doesn't seem to quite make sense, that bit. So, someone pushed Alia even closer to him. She felt herself enthralled by his presence, even as she fought to still her anger. Was this Paul? Gods below! What could she do? Here we have the preacher again. Why has another Leto been taken from us? The preacher demanded. There was real pain in his voice. Answer me if you can. Their message is clear. Abandon certainty. What is it the Letos are telling us? What are all these people? Abandon the idea of certainty. Abandon the idea of the certain universe. Prescience, this kind of thing. Absolute knowledge. The desire to know what happens tomorrow. And another Leto. So this is the third, isn't it? If we're referring, we've got Leto Atreides, we have little baby Leto, this technically Leto the second, and the one that we're doing the kind of sham funeral kind of speech for eulogies, this kind of thing that's going on here. This sermon, this preaching is for technically Leto the third, who's really Leto the second. It's almost starting to get as silly as Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. When we actually, Dune is in 3 parts, and that whenever we get Dune Part 3, it's actually going to be Dune 2, which is technically the 4th part of Dune. Oh, it's getting silly. I have the same words as you do. I read it as the result of the tension of brother and sister in close proximity. Thank you, Cynthia. Sorry. Thank you. If I kill, what would they do? Again, she felt if I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as impostor and heretic. Yeah, I think I'd run with it as part of kind of an ongoing process with the previous, but you could even substitute it with if I killed him right now in the previous sentence. If I killed him and revealed myself, denouncing the preacher as impostor and heretic. There's almost will I be, the sense of a desire that, I wonder, will everyone see me as a hero, as a messiah, will they praise me, this kind of thing. There's some kind of whimsical, kind of wishful thinking going on there. And again, if I killed him and revealed, I wonder is how much of that's Alia, how much of it is the Baron. She fought, is still angry. Was this Paul? Gods below, what could she do? So, why has another Leto been taken from us? The preacher demanded. There was real pain in his voice. Again, the emotions there. Answer me if you can. The message is so clear. Abandon certainty. He repeated it in a rolling stentorian shout. Abandon certainty. That's life's deepest command. That's what life's all about. We're a probe into the unknown, into the uncertain. Why can't you hear Muad'Dib? If certainty is knowing absolutely an absolute future, then that's only death disguised. Such a future becomes now. He showed you this. Again, we have a whole cluster of exclamation marks there. I got 3 for 3 sentences. For 3 lines in my book. So what's the message what's the whole point of it all? Abandon certainty. Abandon the idea of fundamentally knowing what's going on tomorrow. It's life's deepest command. That's what life's all about. We're a probe into the unknown, into the uncertain. Why can't you hear Muad'Dib? If certainty is knowing absolutely an absolute future, then that's only death disguised. Such a future becomes now. He showed you this. We can have to run with it that's not necessarily what certainty is. But I think this is, quite frankly, possibly Frank telling you that this is what he thinks life's all about. I mean, it says as much there. Abandon certainty, accept uncertainty, if you like, okay. But you can be certain about some things. Again, it's not an absolute, is it? You can't really run with absolutes. The idea that the universe is certain and uncertain, if you like, the two futures that Frank presents you with as the choices, if you like, the two things that Muad'Dib shows you, that there's no they're black and white. How would we put it? They're bipolar. In a sense, they're one dimensional groupings. It's that or this, pretty much. It's like saying there's black and there's white, I suppose. That's the best example I would give. That there's two colors, and black or white, and that's all you can get. Of course, if you combine the two, you'll get grey. It's something I point out to my students a lot, no matter what, that there's never two options, ever. It's one thing or the other, not a chance. There's always a middle ground. There's always some other way. With the Greek argument and stuff like that. One of the things I sort of teach the kids whenever they're doing their English essays, how to write essays and stuff, how to gather their information, how to present an argument, is we teach them there's thesis, that's an argument for something, and then there's antithesis, and that's an argument against something. That most people will argue for something or against it. And if you're within that mindset, then whenever you speak, if you're for something, then you're more than likely only ever going to really talk to people who are for it and convince people who are for it, and vice versa for those who are against the thing, if you like. The real problem is being able to present an argument that's not the same as anybody else's, to actually find a third way, and to be able to speak to both groups, to both camps, is actually much smarter. A person who can do that whenever they're talking to people about anything, for example, or writing about something, it means you include everyone. Whether it's your agenda to or not, you bring everybody in, and the way that you can include everybody is to take all the good ideas from the argument for, take all the good arguments from the argument against the thing, put them together without any kind of bias whatsoever, if you can. This is the dialectic. And out of that, you get a third argument, and it's called synthesis. So it's a way of thinking, pretty much. I combine the dialectic with when I'm teaching kids how to write, I combine the dialectic argument with the sympathetic argument, basically. That's about putting your personality into the writing. The dialectic is about getting your facts right and presenting an argument that's clever, that appeals to everybody, isn't tribal, isn't bipartisan, or any of these kind of things, isn't bipolar, and is actually unique. Because you've assembled it out of the things that you've thought about. It gives you a broader way of thinking, if you like. We could start having a bit of fun with it, if you like. We could go, well, there's an argument where everybody knows what's going on, in our universe where everybody has no idea what's going on. What's the in between like? I suppose it's a universe where half of us know what's going on and the other half don't. At the very basic level, you could get that out of it. But I still fundamentally think, that there's no such thing as absolute certainty in anything, as possibly Frank is saying here. But that's life's absolute abandoned certainty. Is life's deepest command. I wouldn't abandon it at all. There are certain things that that you can be certain, if you're thirsty, that if you drink water, your thirst will be satisfied, or hopefully, I suppose. But maybe it comes down, I don't know, it's one of those philosophical things. Ultimately, you can say that ultimately we know nothing about anything, really, because there's no fundamental context, which brings me back to what Frank's saying, what's life all about? Or he's saying that's what it's all about. He's giving you an answer. We're a probe into the unknown, into the uncertain. Are we? I don't know. I wouldn't be certain about that. I go back to my fundamental, question about life, the universe of everything, your 42s, all of that. The ultimate question to me is, what the hell's going on? In the broadest sense of everything. What the hell's going on? Please, could someone tell me? That's what life's all about, is trying to figure out that answer, I think. Or it's not. I don't think I should be too certain about it either, but I have no idea what's going on. If certainty is knowing absolutely an absolute future, I don't think that's what certainty is. But that's only death disguised. Such a future becomes now. He showed you this. There is no future except the now, I suppose, really. Tomorrow's another day, but you exist only in the now, I think. Starts to get tricky that, if you think about it, if we could point a telescope, say, back in the direction of, say, space to where the Earth was, let's call it 40 years ago, um, the same way that we look at how long it's taken to travel a light from a star, if we could figure out where the Earth was 40 years ago and point a telescope at it, would we be able to see ourselves 40 years in the past if you could look at it close enough? All of these things start to really have mess with your head a bit. That's kind of part of the fun, part and parcel of the fun of science fiction, isn't it? Something said, I have the same words as you do. I read it as the result of the tension, but it's a wondrous mystery box, says Object of Grief. Yes, it is indeed. Yeah, anybody who, I'll go with this. We talk about truths. Anybody who tells you that they know what's going on, I think is a liar. Or have deluded themselves. But I think nobody knows what the hell's going on. It could be all some sort of weird solipsistic nightmare. But it's fun trying to find out, I think. Wondrous mystery box indeed. It's a good way of putting it, Object Group. So, what a terrifying directness. The preacher reached out, grabbed. With a terrifying directness, apologies. The preacher reached out and grabbed Alia's arm. It was done without any groping or hesitation. She tried to pull away, but he held her in a painful grip, speaking directly into her face as those around them edged back in confusion. I did a really bad diagram of this, but it was just to give my own. That's what's going on. He grabbed her hand up here, and then that's the my appalling. That I've got to get better at drawing people. I'm no artist. I like doodling, but better at doing things from the side viewpoint. But they're right in on each other here. So this is the preacher. What did Paul Atreides tell you, woman? He demanded. And Alia's thoughts here, how does he know I'm a woman? She asked herself. She wanted to sink into her inner lives, ask their protection, but the world within remained frighteningly, it's a tricky one for me, my teeth, frighteningly silent, mesmerized by this figure from the past. All the lives inside her are quiet. This is the preacher again. He told you that completion equals death. The preacher shouted. Absolute prediction is completion is death. Let me just read that again. He told you that completion equals death. Sorry, with big exclamation mark. The preacher shouted. Absolute prediction is completion is death, with another exclamation mark. So, he's given us a tripartite equation here, if you like. Absolute prediction equals death, which equals completion. Come to that in a wee second, I suppose. Let me see. She tried to pry his fingers away. She wanted to grab her knife and slash him away from her, but dared not. She had never felt this daunted in all of her life. So here's the wee bit I scribbled down here. Completion equals death equals absolute prediction. I've written metaphorically, yes, actually, no. And I've written absolute prediction does not equal completion. You could say that to complete a thing is the death of the thing, is the end of the thing, if you like. We're happy. I'm sure we all happy enough run with the idea of metaphorical deaths, little deaths, petty. Is it petty mort? This kind of thing. It's part and parcel of some philosophies and things like that and religions. I would talk about many different versions of me over the years. And interestingly, I was chatting with to my wife about this, but on some levels, the many different versions of me, they're all dead. Those people don't exist anymore. The thing that's in front of you now is kind of an amalgamation of them all, but I'm alive and they're not. If that makes sense. It depends on how you look at things. But to complete something, we completed the Dune book club. It didn't mean it died in a way, but maybe it was the end. It was the natural end of the thing. It was the death of it. But then we moved on, didn't we? But absolute prediction is not equal to completion. To complete something is not to absolutely predict it. And a good example of that's doing a PhD, for example, to complete the damn thing. It shouldn't have any resemblance whatsoever to how you predicted it might go at the start. And when you enter a thing like that, by the way, you've put together a body of research already. You've put a whole reading list together, all this kind of stuff. You have a fair idea of, in your own mind, how your research should go. There's a level of prediction there, if that makes sense, at the start of any PhD, because you have to have an argument for something. You have to have already constructed that. How that will go is entirely based on your research. If my PhD was anything to go by, look, nothing like how it started out by the end. It doesn't mean I didn't complete it. And in a funny way, it's not completed because no PhDs really, well, of the literary time should be completed, I suppose, in the space they give you. Maybe that's just a bad modern way of thinking about it. But a PhD often ends with, here's all the stuff I didn't have time or room to put in. I suggest other people do this. It's your recommendations, this kind of thing. So I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I don't see the three things as being equal here. And I get the idea of absolute prediction being death. With Frank Herbert, it's an important thing to think about in the Dune series. That singular statement, to say it's completion, to make the three together, I don't quite go with it all the way. Absolute prediction is completion, no, but is death, yes, if you like. But again, these things, we could argue philosophically about these things quite a lot, but it's just what I tend to do is apply a kind of real world example to something. And generally, with me, I'll start by reductio ad absurdum. If I can go there, I'll be done very quickly with any kind of statement like that. Whenever it comes to absolutes, reductio ad absurdum is probably your best tool in the box, if you like. You can take an absolute. In fact, you can find any alternative to an absolute, and the absolute's destroyed instantly. So but also if you can reduce it to an absurdity very quickly, then that thing usually is absurd. Diogenes is chicken, as I like to point out. So the preacher lifted his chin. I'll just run that through that very quickly again. She tried to pry his fingers away. She wanted to grab her knife and slash him away from her, but dared not. She had never felt this daunted in all of her life. Pardon me, I just wanted to point that out, just really in relation to what I have to say about Alia at the end of this chapter. The preacher lifted his chin to speak over her to the crowd, shouted, "I give you Muad'Dib's words," he said. "I'm going to rub your faces in things you tried to avoid. I don't find it strange that all of you want to believe is only that which comforts you. How else do humans invent the traps which betray us into mediocrity? How else do we define cowardice? That's what Muad'Dib taught you. To be safe, to be comfortable, to know what's going to happen, to not have to worry about anything, to not have to deal with crap, shit happening, the universe taking a big dump on you, all this kind of stuff. To know the safe way through is to be a coward, is to be a coward in the face of life and the universe, is to be comfortable maybe, but is to be mediocre, to be, just a bit shit. I think the equation here is that kind of life within this chapter is that we get cattle mentioned, the cattle metaphors, this kind of thing. You're just comfortable living the way you are until this kind of thing, being melt and just drifting through, but there's no challenge, there's no fear to overcome, and because of that how else do we define cowardice is by living The suggestion is by living the most safest, unchallenging life that you can. And this is what Muad'Dib taught you, because that's kind of what he did, isn't it? It's his mistake was to live in the future, to seek certainty of what's going to happen, rather than being able to accept what he had in life and live in an uncertain universe. Um, and the interesting thing, I suppose, that we learn as we go through the Dune series is that, particularly within Dune Messiah, is that things did not turn out the way that Paul Muad'Dib foresaw. They mostly did, but there were slight variations. There were differences, and yeah, it kind of, he kind of made what's going on here with him a bit at that point. Um, Interestingly enough, it's something that I was chatting to Chai about. Was as we move along, I take these notes. Just as we go further and further down the development of particularly this trilogy, the first three Dune books were all conceived, parts of them written at the same time, and I think sometimes we can see where those parts are. There's a difference in some stylistic elements within Children of Dune, particularly, and time has gone by for Frank, and he's written a few books in between, a number of books in between, and he's been reasonably successful. So remember, I think sometimes remember that Dune is his second novel, pretty much. Quite an impressive second novel, I think. The first one is on Under Pressure. The Dragon in the Sea, or 21st Century Sub, as it's known, I suppose. But yeah, the thing is, I suppose, that there are things that are dropped in Dune that we don't pick up until way, way later, and it's hard to keep them running in your mind. I was thinking about this. I actually thought that maybe there's a term for it. I was going to call it Dune drift. That the further we get from the start of the story, it's harder to kind of remember the different little threads that are left hanging, the little mysteries that are there. And yet at the same time, I suppose in picking it apart, sometimes like this, we have actually been able to jump back a little bit in the notes. But I was just thinking about it, and I think it's an interesting point. And I decided to give a name to it, and I'm going to call it Dune Drift. But anyway, I'll just push on, folks, here till we finish this, and we'll have a wee quick natter about the end here. But cowardice, being safe, being mediocre, this is the lesson that Muad'Dib and that Leto have shown you, that you shouldn't live this way, that you should choose the uncertain universe, the unsafe universe, not the one where you know everything is going to happen. How else do we define cowardice? That's what Muad'Dib taught you. Abruptly, he released Alia's arm, thrust her into the crowd. She would have fallen but for the press of people supporting her. And I've written that there's a metaphor here, I think, that's all very relevant to Alia, and that we could take that statement. Sorry, I've highlighted it, but the highlighter has kind of erased my ink. I'm back in action with the ink pens, folks. I've managed to get them all repaired. Hey, which makes writing these notes so much more enjoyable and easier. Love my ink pens. I soaked them for 4 days this time to get all the ink drawn out. And they're working good, which is great. So I didn't have to buy a new one. I'm very delighted about that. I love getting utility out of my pens. So abruptly he released. Yeah, she would have fallen but for the press of people supporting her. I just kind of that her position at the minute, it's the people supporting her in a funny way, that how she's been able to hang on, do what she's needed to do, is with the people around her, the institutions that have grown up around, the priests of Muad'Dib, that religion, etc., etc. Her power is dependent on the people, and that's what we've been taught. We've been told, if we go back, where did we get it? It's about your institutions. Was it right at the start? Yes. I tell you to, this is from the preacher right at the very beginning of the chapter, I tell you to learn that a government's growth and its death are apparent in the growth and death of its citizens. We can consider Alia the government at this point, if you like, along with her priesthood. but it's the people here that are holding her up. She would have fallen but for the press of people. I thought it was an interesting little point that he pushed her back. I just thought, I don't know if you agree with me, I thought there was a wee sense of a metaphor there in relation to Alia and the people, and to the whole kind of messianic impulse that develops around a character like Paul and Alia, because she has her own cult of worship, doesn't she? To exist is to stand out away from the background, the preacher said. You aren't thinking or really existing unless you're willing to risk even your own sanity in the judgment of your own existence. That's fair enough. Well, I don't know. Stand out away from the background. You aren't thinking or really existing unless you're willing to risk even your own sanity in the judgment of your existence. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's plenty of people that get by just fine, who wouldn't risk their sanity, for example, in the judgment of their own existence, because they wouldn't really put that much thought into it, to be honest with you. But it doesn't mean that they don't think or exist, because that's not true. And I think we had a wee bit back. Was it the previous chapter? We were having a bit of a. I think I mentioned we bit of a chat with this with Julian as well. That the Plato's allegory of the cave. Well, there's something of that persisting in this. I think to exist is to stand out away from the background. You aren't existing unless you're willing to risk even your own sanity in the judgment of your existence. There's something almost Socratic about that, isn't it? The unexamined life is not worth living, this kind of thing. It says who? I think it's quite possible that people can have a very nice existence and not spend too much time worrying or thinking about what's going on. Just get on with it and have a perfectly nice life, I think. Stepping down, the preacher once more took Alia's arm. No faltering or hesitation. He was gentler this time, though. Leaning close, he pitched his voice for her ears alone, said, "Stop trying to pull me once more into the background, sister." Now, just previous to exist is to stand out away from the background. Stop trying to pull me once more into the background. And at this point, I've written down, so that's a direct address to Alia by the preacher, and calls her sister. Now, you could take it in the loose term that brothers and sisters within a religion, but no, it's a private thing for her. And I've written down that that's it. She should know now. She has to know that this is Paul. And then I actually put, and I was wondering about this, is this a paradoxical statement? To be pushed into the background? Let me see. Pull me. Sorry, yeah, to be pulled into the background. I thought surely you would be pushed into the background. You'd be pulled into the foreground. That's kind of where I was going with that. To exist is to stand out away from the background, is what he's saying. To stand out away from it. You're trying to pull me once more into the background, sister, where he wouldn't exist. He wants to exist. Again, this is Paul rejecting his own church and ultimately his role in this thing and going after his humanity. He doesn't want to be brought back into all of this religion, all of this nonsense to lose himself. He's trying to regain his humanity here. And that's telling her, don't pull me back into this. I'm not doing it. Then, hand on his young guide's shoulder, he stepped into the throng. Way was made for the strange pair. So his last statement here is for her privately alone. It's a private statement between them and her, between Paul and Alia. Way was made for the strange pair. Hands reached out to touch the preacher, but people reached with an awesome tenderness, fearful of what they might find beneath that dusty Fremen robe. The next paragraph I have is a good one. I have Ali, whoever Ali is, stood alone, as of course it should be Alia. But I've got Ali stood alone in her shock as the throng moved out behind the preacher. Alia stood alone in her shock as the throng moved out behind the preacher, is what it should be. Another letter missing. Another name mutilated. Right. Okay, we're nearly there, folks. So, certainty filled her. Here we go. This is it. And this is the moment that we've been kind of building. And I think this, by the way, is really good character development, running with Alia's doubts and her fragmented sanity as well. Certainty filled her. What were we just told? Oh no, sorry, that was something. Sorry, no, I'm drifting. Sorry, my head went somewhere else. Sorry, forget that. Certainty filled her. It was Paul. No doubt remained. It was her brother. She felt what the crowd felt. So there we go. There's no more doubt. It's him. She knows it's him. She felt what the crowd felt. She had stood in the sacred presence, and now her universe tumbled all about her. She wanted to run after him, pleading for him to save her from herself, but she could not move. While others passed to follow the preacher and his guide, she stood intoxicated with an absolute despair, a distress so deep that she could only tremble with it, unable to command her own muscles. What will I do? What will I do? She asked herself. Now she did not even have Duncan to lean upon, nor her mother. The inner lives remained silent. There was Ganima, held securely under guard within the keep, but Alia could not bring herself to take this distress to the surviving twin. Everyone has turned against me. What can I do? And there we go. And that's the end of our chapter. Just to drop back a wee bit, some of these highlighters kind of almost wipe out your words after you highlight them. You use an ink pen. Sorry, just filling that in. I think we get the full sense, a huge sense of the tragedy of Alia here. Her universe, sorry, this is a bit I'm having to rewrite here again as well. The highlighter is her universe tumbled all about her. Simply put, Paul's alive. Her brother is not dead. I've got a tripartite equation here. Paul equals the Emperor equals power. If Paul's not dead, that he is the Emperor, she is regent on the assumption that he is dead and that his son will come to power. All he has to do is show himself. That's it. Her power has gone. It's all gone. All he has to do is go, aha, it's me. I'm Paul. I'm back, and that's it. All hail Paul, the Emperor of the known universe, because that's who he is. Her power only comes from his death. In terms of Alia stood alone in her shock as the throng moved out behind the preacher. And it's almost like everyone else is following him, and she cannot. She's fixed there. And the real aspects of her tragedy come in a couple of sentences here. The first one, so first of all, her reality has broken. That's it. And knowing that he's alive, everything, her whole universe tumbled about her. Her reality has fractured. And it's already fractured and fragmented, isn't it? We've got the mirror thing running with Alia in this book. She wanted, this is the really sad bit, I think. She wanted to run after him, pleading for him to save her from herself, but she could not move. And this is by the way, immediately follows on that she had felt what the crowd felt, that she had stood in the sacred presence of her brother. That she felt what the crowd felt. She got it. It's this desire that if this is God, Messiah, prophet, could he not save me? She wanted to run after him, pleading for him to save her from herself, but she could not move. You can imagine what she would be saying. Save me, please help me. Save me, Paul. Please help me. Something like that. That's what she wants to do. That's heartbreaking. while others passed to follow them. She stood intoxicated with absolute despair. Jared Manley Hopkins, isn't it, would tell you that despair is the state of being of a person who has lost their faith. For him as a priest, he lost his faith at a certain part. Sonnets of Desolation. Well, I've talked about him. He's a good fun guy to read. I like him a lot. He's a great poet. So he described despair as being the absolute opposite of faith. To someone who had faith, if you like, that if you firmly believed in God and fully believed in God, the opposite state to be in would be one of despair, and that would be the absence of God in your life. That's the way he described it in a religious context, and I kind of get a sense of it here as well. Absolute despair, a distress so deep that she could only tremble, that she's actually shaking, unable to command her own muscles. It made me wonder, is there some kind of compulsion in Paul's, why can't she move? And it isn't, there's a couple of answers to that question. One is it could be a compulsion hidden within voice. We've seen that before. It could be the shock of it all, simply that she is actually in shock. And hence the trembling, we're told immediately prior to this, she stood alone in her shock. Her brother's not dead, it's a lot to take in. Everything, her political situation, her own situation with her husband, situation with the priest, the people on the planet. She's in a right old state now, and she's got no power. Technically, he can take it back anytime he wants. The only thing that might have safer in that sense is that it looks like he's not going to. He's walking away. But the acknowledgement, that's Paul. It was Paul. No doubt remained. It was her brother. Her universe tumbled all about her. She wanted to run after him, pleading for him to save her from herself, but she could not move. She stood intoxicated with despair. I think that's it, really, isn't it? It's all the emotions, the shock of it, a distress so deep that she could only tremble with it, unable to command her own muscles. What will I do? What will I do? She asked herself. It's heartbreaking, really. If you know the character, if we followed this character all the way from the start, we've been following this character since before she was born. A real favorite of mine in the series, especially in the previous two books, but especially in Dune. Big fan of Alia as a character. I think she's a great character, and I think, by the way, that overall she's very well rounded. And that this is where we get the real, as much as we can see the tragedy of Paul Atreides in the Dune series, equally that tragedy is shared by Alia, I think, and I see her as being a more tragic character than Paul in many ways. And of course, she's become our villain in some ways within this book as well. But it's a hard thing to take from your villain, isn't it? What will I do? What will I do? If only you could save me from myself. Everyone has turned against me. What can I do? She's everything there is an evocation of tragedy and pity. I think we should be really pitying her at this point. It's heartbreaking to see her this way. And again, this is one of our heroes from the previous part of the story. Alia was absolutely, the female Paul, if you like, the female aspect of him. And absolutely a character that we've rooted for. This is the person that killed the Baron. And seemed, by the way, as a 2 or 3 year old to be much more powerful than Paul. Was able to put herself into his future and leave a message for him. She could do things. Her fall in terms of her abilities, the continuous use of the drug, and the desire to hold on to power, and then the fragmentation of her personality by her mother's crime, really, which is to willingly take this incredibly powerful drug while she was pregnant. Both Alia and Paul can be seen as products of their parents' desires, if you like, that they've not really had a say in. There's been things done to them prior to birth but make them who they are. They're fascinating characters, aren't they? But I really got the sense of Alia, her tragedy here. It's got to be played out yet, But my sympathies at the end of this chapter were absolutely with her. And she would have fallen, but for the press of the people, she is going to fall. And also that we get. So I think it's a good chapter. It's one that drives forward very much. It ties up a couple of things and changes the shift. It's a good chapter for tension, which Frank is really good at. Frank's a master of tension. Of all the things that he does, I think that's what he does best. And we'll point out, again, talking about occasionally his first book, by the way. There we go, a bit of a whistle with the teeth. Under Pressure is his preferred title. It's what's that? I've Got the Dragon in the Sea. It is a powerhouse of tension. It's a masterclass in tension, I think. It's a great book. It has no chapters or divisions within it. So as you read it, the tension just builds and builds and builds. And it's a submarine book. You get the sense of the closed environment, the closed environment inside an external environment that's fatal to the people in the sealed internal environment, if you like. It's a great book, but yeah, that's what Frank does really, really well. Just going to say, basically, if you want to see how well he does it, read it Under Pressure. Dragon in the Sea. It's his first novel, and it's a powerhouse of tension. So it's a great wee chapter, folks. It's setting things up. It's confirmed things that we pretty much know and are certain of, but we have to go. We're not 100% certain, but now we are, and and now we have that certainty for Alia as well. She knows, I suppose, that within the ambiguity of is it Paul, isn't Paul, there's always been the possibility of attacking and killing the preacher, if you like. And a part of it has been, I think, that there's been enough clues there to suggest, same as the clues to us, that the preacher is Paul. So now we can happily say it out loud, if you like. Preacher is Paul Muad'Dib Atreides. He's not dead. Spoiler. No need to spoil it anyway. As a Frank people we talk about spoiler alerts and stuff for the Dune series, Frank does a whole lot of spoiling for us because we have foresight often because of the epigraphs and things like that, But there we go, folks. A very interesting chapter. There's a few little questions about it. I'm still kind of curious about a couple of these things in it. Not everything I agree with there either, but that's just me being a bit picky. But yes, indeed, some key concepts there. The absolute prediction equals death, I think, is very important. I would chuck out the completion, with the bathwater there. That to know the future is to be cowardly, to be stagnant, to live a comfortable life that wouldn't challenge you, that wouldn't make you any real sense of it. I suppose the idea is a real person. I think Frank's speaking from a very general point of view himself. There, he's if thinking about everybody must be this way in our minds. I can tell you that we're not. But it doesn't make people any less of a person or any less thoughtful or any less real. If you see what I mean, not all of us spend, I've discovered this the hard way, but very few people spend the amount of time pondering about their existence that I would. The whole what the hell's going on thing, it's most people just get on with things, don't they? Frank would says if you live that life and just try to figure things that's mediocre, that's that you wouldn't be thinking, you wouldn't be existing, and it's as I said, it's a bit like the old statement, the unexamined life is not worth living. Who's to say that's that's Socratic thinking? That's Socrates, isn't it? What a load of crap. But who's to say that is the case? Prove it. Basically what you're saying is that someone that doesn't analyze every little aspect of their lives, that life is not worth living. I disagree. People you can live in the moment and experience joy and all sorts of things, and not really have to look too deep at it. If you see what I mean. So I don't agree with Frank's thinking here. It's a bit universal. It's a bit ubiquitous. It's a bit they're generalizations, and I don't agree. But there we go, folks. So they're saying, who is Paul trying to convince? Besides Alia, he also seems to be talking to an earlier version of himself, to the traditional Fremen, and perhaps to Ganima's self-induced certainty regarding Leto. Christopher Christ saying, SMH, I think her downfall was chasing after bigger doses of melange. It was a part of it, wasn't it? But we're told that, well, again, we've got to have a wee look at it, Christopher, because it's to do with the difference between, I suppose, the difference we're told really is the difference between Alia and Ganima and Leto II. Why does they're all the same in a sense that they're in a kind of way preborn. So what is it that they're able to do that she isn't? What is it that she does that drives her mad that they don't do? And we're told that a wee while back, I think, Christopher. There's an example of Dune drift. It's simply that she's tried to engage in. Oh no, she hasn't. She's tried to suppress the in her lives. It's tried not to do that. To try and not. Whereas the difference is that Ganima and Leto actually engage with them, and that's how That's how they don't become. Well, it's what the Bene Gesserit define as abomination, isn't it? But we'll not spoil that actually, because we'll get to it at the end of the book. But there's a statement by Leto to what he actually is. So the question is technically is what happens to Alia. I mean, that's what the Bene Gesserit describe as abomination, I think. The madness that comes with the preborn and all that knowledge. But then whatever happens to Ganima and Leto II, that's not the same thing. So as much as he would admit to being an abomination, I don't think that's what he is. If Alia is one thing, Leto and Ganima are not the same, if that makes sense, Pardon me. Cynthia's question, and I'll wrap up very quickly, folks. Just very shortly. Who is Paul trying to convince besides Alia? He also seems to be talking to an earlier version of himself, to the traditional Fremen, and perhaps to Ganima's self-induced certainty regarding Leto. Yeah, I think that's really because he addresses what Ganima has to say at the start, and then says, "I concur." Doesn't he? Where are we? But who is he addressing? Or who's he trying to convince? Is a very good point. You're saying he also seems to be talking to an earlier version of himself. We're also told, and I think yes, I think who's he talking to? He's here preaching. He's preaching to everyone. So I would say that we have a combination of the desert Fremen here, the priesthood. We've got pilgrims. We've got Alia herself as well. He's bringing up. This is the day of mourning. Ganima's response. And this is the day that made his death, his presence real in all places. It's a kind of like a Kwisatz Haderach type. It's the day of the Kwisatz Haderach. Was that what I wrote? It is indeed. Pardon me. Where was the wee bit? Yes, Ganima has said to you that the blood of her brother cannot be washed off. I concur. So he's making sure this statement, I think if it's in a public place, first of all. So I think there's also, by the way, the other group that we forget about that we mentioned here is spies. Everybody's got spies and they're all listening. Everybody's listening here, I think. Who's he trying to convince? Everyone who follows his religion, I think, but it's turning on the church and the systems here is what he's trying to get the people to do, I think. I in relation to Alia, though, I'm not too sure, because if Paul still has prescience, could he see what's going on with his sister? Could he find a way to save her? was where my mind was going. Um, Up until the point where he leaves the golden path, Leto hasn't taken. He could still use his prescience. He could still figure things out. Is there a way to save Alia? My guess is no. Or is it that simply, well, he certainly didn't do anything to help Chani in the previous, in June Messiah. I'm often a bit critical of Paul and how he treats Chani. But that was simply he wasn't there. He was in all these futures all the time, wasn't he? Waiting for something to happen, never really doing anything, just waiting for the future to be now. So an earlier version of himself possibly is also meant maybe ultimately for Leto one day. Who's kind of an earlier version of himself. But again, yes, you're quite right. I suppose you have to always remember that if he's prescient as a young man, he could be looking through time to seeing himself giving this talk. It's which versions of. But then why didn't it starts to get really messy. The whole point is that his prescience only ever sees snapshots. I feel like of like a single frame within all of time. That time is so enormous and. That no one person's prescience could cover the merest mote of it, in that sense that you never really would see what's going to happen. To the traditional family, perhaps the Ganymede's self-induced certainty regarding Leto. The other bit I would say about it, it's a good question. I think it's going out to all people. Ganymede, I suppose, at the same time, as you say, is under self-induced. She's under that kind of self-hypnotism, if you like. But the other thing that I thought, just in relation to who's Paul trying to convince, who's he addressing, is that we're also told Leto has gone where his father went, has done what his father did. Muad'Dib's church says he chose, in behalf of his own humanity, a course which might appear absurd and foolhardy, but which history will validate. That history is being rewritten even now. And I think it's a statement. I say to you that there is another lesson to be learned from these lives and their endings, whatever they're writing now, that someone's writing this down. Excuse me. Hang on. That was a fast out of the blue sneeze. Apologies, folks. Managed to get the other two muted. So I think it's also who's Paul trying to convince. It's also the people that are giving us our epigraphs are from various writers, various books, but they're often historians. So I think it's a very good question, Cynthia. I think it's all of those, but I think it's also for the unseen historians who will validate what's, as it says here, but also that will be rewritten, some that will be changed. So possibly it's an appeal as well to some historian to write the correct history, if you see what I mean, or that there'll be one record of it by him coming and speaking here. But I'm sure everything that he said here is recorded by all sorts of people, especially if we understand this universe. Alia's in the crowd, but her spies will be there. There's priests in the crowd. There's pilgrims. There's Fremen. There's all sorts. But I'd imagine all the noble houses are represented in some way here. They've all got spies. Everyone's got spies. It's that kind of universe. But there we go. So listen, folks. I'll wrap up. That's us. Next one is chapter 34. Where we have a nice epigraph from the Azar book. It'll be the second time we'll have it mentioned. It's a Bene Gesserit book, and I'm looking forward to getting that done. Carla's saying it makes sense that Paul can't see Alia if she is also prescient, although I was never really sure if or to what degree she was. It seems that she had a degree of prescience, and then that ability faded away, or that she lost it, and that she couldn't get it to work without more and more and more melange. But I got the sense that they were both prescient and had other memory. in the book, but Alia's prescience faded away, or not faded away, just simply for it to work required more and more doses of melange. The difference, I suppose, in the two is that she is exposed to the water of life prior to being born, if you like, whereas Paul is not. So there are differences in the two, and again, one's male, one's female. Alia was supposed to be what Paul. Alia was supposed to be Paul, if you see what I mean. Paul wasn't meant to be a boy. The first child, if you like, there should have been a switch, if you like. I always thought, here's an interesting one to the Dune series. I always thought that here's one for you. Jessica was ordered to give bear. Well, the word is only sons to the Atreides, or sorry, only daughters to the Atreides, and then she gives him a son, which is Paul. And especially with the way things work, and with the Bene Gesserit, why didn't she just give him twins? Why didn't Jessica give birth to twins? And if she can adjust the chemistry, all of that, the egg, everything in her body, why didn't she have a female and male set of twins for Leto? And she, have I spoiled this? In doing so, would have satisfied what her husband wanted, or what Leto the First wanted, which was a son, and would have given the Bene Gesserit the daughter, which could have been, what was it, wed to the Harkonnens and sealed the genetic breach. So the whole thing, Jessica, I suppose, there you go. That's a kind of that one-dimensional thinking. It's either or, isn't it? It's a boy or a girl. Whereas we've never considered the fact that Jessica could have had a male and female set of twins at the beginning of it all, and given everybody what they want, and none of this would have happened. Yeah, she is prescient, Carlos, and there's an incident in Dune way back, towards the end of the book, where Paul basically gets a message. It's a future message that Alia has sent from a point in the past, and it's an ability that she basically has the ability to leave a message for when he arrives at a point in time. It's waiting for him in a sense. And so Alia's abilities are kind of hyped in a way, and she points out that she can do things that even Paul can't. So I don't know. I think it's part of the problem of the time, and what I've been calling Dune drift this week, I think, is a problem also for Frank Herbert, keeping certain aspects of your story going. And as much as he's written these 3 different volumes of Dune, set certain things down at certain times. Pardon me. Whereas one, he starts writing really Dune, he begins writing it. Well, the research, all of that, it's about 5 years. So knock back from probably 1958 is where he starts doing his work. 57 or 58, I think, on Dune. And then by the time we get to, what have we got here? I've got copyright 76. On this edition anyway. I'm not too sure. Let me just double check my first notebook, and I'll tell you. Put the publishing details in on the start of each book. First published analog, science fiction, science fact, January 1976 to April 1976. 4 parts. The last of the Dune series to be serialized. This is Children of Dune. Hardback form sold 75,000 plus copies. First hardback cover bestseller in science fiction. Hugo Award nomination 1977, no win. Who won that year? Where Late the Sweet Bird sang by Kate Wilhelm. Haven't read that. So there you go. So our publication date is 76. So in terms of book format, anyway, 76 from 65. There's 11 years between the writing of the books, and I think occasionally something gets lost or just not caught. But in Dune, the suggestion is that little baby Alia is much more powerful than Paul, is prescient, has other memory. Very obviously, the other memory is prescient, and it has other abilities that Paul doesn't have. Paul can't leave messages in the future for himself, for example. So it's an interesting question, isn't it? Makes sense that Paul can't see Alia if she's also present. Well, as much as maybe the question is, you can see a person, maybe what the prescience seems to work in a visual way, that you get a photo, like a snapshot, a Polaroid, if you like, of an event, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can see the internal workings of somebody's mind. If Alia had shouted these things out, he would be aware of them. But in the future, say if he had a vision of it in the future, but if everything was internalized, he wouldn't really know what necessarily is going on in her head. But yeah, so the question, it's never really explained, and Frank doesn't necessarily do that. But there's aspects to her drug addiction. The differences, I think, in the genders and in the nature, particularly the nature of her relationship with drugs. I think there's a lot of it, but that she's preborn and that sooner or later this drives you mad. We get the gist of it that Leto II and Ganymede don't go mad because they embrace the inner lives within them and accept that they're a part of themselves. And I think this is the bit that they figure out earlier, actually, that the difference is that Alia didn't do it. She tried to fight it. And it's the fighting it that eventually drove her mad. And ultimately allowed the Baron's personality then to come out and help take her over, But there we go, folks. I hope that helped. But yeah, I've just got tragic, alone, easy prey for the Baron. Her brother is not dead. Paul equals Emperor equals power. And I've just, the big thing I've written in a big circle just next to her at the end is just pity. She's a tragic figure. I absolutely pity her here. But the idea is that, Paul, the universal super being, our great hero, can't save his sister. I suppose he couldn't save Chani either. And the real sad thing is that she wants to be saved. She wants to be, more like it's a desperate, deeply depressed, disturbed, despairing Alia that we have here. And you can just, she's just a young woman who wants help and wants out. She's gone insane through no real fault of her own. To be honest with you, that's the aspect of her tragedy. Very much part of the Atreides thing that we get within the Dune series, and one of the big things is, I suppose, that we, the sins of the father are the sins of the son, are the sins of the or the sins of the mother are the sins of the daughter in many ways in the Dune universe. I said it ties in nicely with the Atreides myth, that perpetual ongoing thing within the family, of self-slaughter and violence and revenge, and grandfather and granddaughter are one, and the person that inhabits her head is her grandfather, and she's also his murderer. She killed him. And she killed him in a nice way. It was a poison that killed him real quick. But it's interesting. Yeah, and for a long time I believed that the Baron was a manifestation of her madness, and that he wasn't really there, but he is. He's a product of other memory, and the reason why. It's they share the genetic ancestors, don't they, of the Atreides? So that's the thing that falls apart with Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's universe. They're not descendants of the Atreides from Greek mythology and Greek history. They're just they made it all up. That kind of thing. Well, there we go, folks. It's just gone past 1:00. It's been a delight chatting to you. This has gone really well. I don't know if my voice sounds too different or not, to be honest with you, but you might notice the whole lack of coughing and spluttering as well. So, fortunate accidents maybe have helped improve my health a wee bit. That's great. So thank you very much all for popping in. It's great to see you all again. Sorry it's been a few weeks. It's one of those things, isn't it? So they're saying thanks, Doc, and all. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Cynthia. Again, you caught one of those wee bits where I left out a couple of words. Always much appreciated, everybody, for your questions, your suggestions, and your input. And I've got a few questions about that one myself. So yes, indeed. Let me just check for you for next time. How much work are we going to do? With my voice at the minute, we'll just go. I think the smart thing is to run with one chapter for a few weeks and not wreck it. Where are we? So next week's chapter will be on Tuesday as normal, back to normal. It's just, we're going to do chapter 34 on its own. So that's the epigraph that begins. The one-eyed view of our universe says you must not look far afield for problems. Such problems may never arrive. Instead, tend to the wolf within your fences. The packs ranging outside may not even exist. That's from the Azar book, Shamra Wonderful. So that's the one we'll be starting with next week. So there we go, folks. Carlos Crusade saying thanks, Doc. Hope to see you again soon. Everything's good here, folks, and I'm super busy with students at the minute this week, exam time. So a couple of weeks' time, exams will be over. My workload will get a wee bit quieter in terms of the student work, and that means I can get a wee bit more of this done. So hopefully we'll pick it up a wee bit. But yes, we'll be back to normal, folks, every Tuesday at 10, hopefully. We're on GMT +1. And I'd just say thank you very much, as always, to all of you. I'll say good night. Look after yourselves wherever you are. Take it easy, and I hope the universe lets you live in peace. So thank you very much, folks. Take it easy. We'll see you next week at the same time. All the best. Take care. Bye bye.